Oh, good morning, everyone. Just let me suggest my first observation is that after having moved the meeting room and seeing that all of you figured it out, you're an extremely competent group. But I want to thank you for being here today. And a word of caution, the acoustics in this room, as you can tell, are near concert level. And those of us on the dais, we have switches that control the mics if they're on or off. What I've been told is the microphones at the panelist table are on all the time. So those of you that have had enough history with the building are familiar with things that are said that didn't need to be said and communicated to the rest of the world. Just a word of caution, I want you to be aware of that. Those microphones are on all the time. My name is Pedro Nava, and I'm the chair of the Hoover Commission. And before we begin, I want to introduce the other commissioners that are here. Sean Varner to my left, Helen Torres to my right. I expect that we will be joined by other commissioners who probably didn't have as much luck as you did finding the room. Also today with us is the Commission's Executive Director, Carol Belia, to my left, Deputy Executive Director, Jim Wasserman, to my far right, and that's only by geography, Analyst Sheridan Callister, Matthew Gannon. This is the Commission's first look at special districts since our 2000 report, Special Districts, Relics of the Past or Resources for the Future. At this hearing, the Commission will largely focus on the largely 3,000 independent special districts run by elected or appointed boards with assistance of professional staffs. The Commission will hear from 8 witnesses today to set the stage for its exploration of state policy regarding special districts. Witnesses will discuss the basics of special district organization, address some criticisms of special districts, and offer assessments of the Commission's 2000 report. We will hear from witnesses on what has and has not changed since 2000, explore new challenges and opportunities facing special districts, and consider what new areas should be investigated by this study. We will first hear from Kyle Peckham, Advocacy and Public Affairs Director for the California Special Districts Association, who will provide an overall view of special districts in the state. The second panel will focus on how changing times are affecting special districts. It will feature Amber King, Senior Legislative Advocate for the Association of California Healthcare Districts, and Michael Schwartz, Fire Chief of the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. The third panel will examine the role of local agency formation commissions, or LAFCOs, in regards to special districts. We'll hear from Pamela Miller, the Executive Director of the California Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions, or CAL-LAFCO, along with John Leopold, Chair of CAL-LAFCO, and Stephen Douglas, Executive Director of CAL-LAFCO. The final panel includes Michael Coleman, who is a principal of CaliforniaCityFinance.com, and John Kupal, the President of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. They will discuss the role of property taxes and fees in funding special districts. There will be an opportunity for public comment following the testimony of scheduled witnesses. Please notify the Commission staff who are sitting in the front row if you would like to provide public comment. Today's hearing will be recorded by Assembly TV and streamed live over the internet by the California Channel. The Commission will hold its business meeting immediately following this hearing across the street in room 175 at 925 L Street. I want to thank the witnesses for their written testimony. As you offer your remarks, I'd ask you to briefly summarize the major points so that the commissioners can ask you questions and we can better develop the discussion. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and I'd ask Ms. Belia to please call the first witness.
Welcome. I'm just going to add to the comments. As we abruptly changed our room late yesterday, we also lost the ability to be part of Assembly TV. So we actually aren't going to be streamed live. But as you can see in the back of the room, we are taping, and that tape will be made available with a link on our website as soon as possible. So with that, I'd also like to comment our business meeting also moved. We're in the same location, 925, but not room 175. We're in the lower level conference room. So same location, but a different meeting room. So with that, I will call the first witness. Kyle Packham is the Advocacy and Public Affairs Director for the California Special Districts Association, where he directs legislative, grassroots, and public affairs outreach programs working on behalf of thousands of special districts across the state. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. First, I would like to thank your staff. They've been extremely accessible. I'm just pulling up my timer here because I want to stick to your time. So, your staff has been extremely helpful and accessible throughout this process, and I just want to thank them before I get started. Second, I'd like to thank you for inviting CSDA to participate in this hearing. We appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective about the special districts that deliver essential local services and infrastructure to millions of Californians throughout the state. We did submit an extensive written testimony, which I won't belabor every page of the 19 pages and 70 pages of attachments, but I will try to highlight just three things, and that's a brief overview of special districts, some comments with regard to the 2000 report, and then lastly, and I think most importantly, would be a number of potential opportunities that we hope to work on in partnership with you and other stakeholders in order to make some real progress heading into the next hearing. So first, a brief overview of special districts. Special districts are a form of local government that follow basically many of the same laws as cities and counties, the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, financial compensation, and transaction reports to the state controller, among many others. These special districts are created by a community's residents, funded by those residents, and overseen by those residents for the purpose of providing new or heightened levels of services and infrastructure to their community. In other words, special districts are formed when it's something the community wants, something they want done well, and something that they want done with local control. Special districts are not unique to California, as our written testimony notes. Overall, special districts in California make up 7.5% of the nationwide total, while our population here in California, as you know, makes up 12% of the nationwide total. It's according to the most recent U.S. Census statistics. This means that 33 of the 50 states in the nation have a higher density of special districts per population than the special districts here in California. And in fact, there's been a 5% decline in the number of special districts in California since it peaked in 1997. Over that same period, there's been a 10% increase in the number of special districts across the nation. It's sometimes asked, what makes special districts so special? A longtime staffer in the Capitol, Peter Detweiler, in the Local Government Committee, used to say that, and the answer is specialized services that they provide. That's what makes them so special. Unlike general purpose governments, special districts focus on providing one service, or sometimes a small suite of services, to a community. It is this focused service that leads to efficiency and effectiveness for special districts. By focusing on being the best at doing one thing, special districts excel at innovation. It also allows them to plan ahead, think long-term, and practice sustainable decision-making. Connecting governance, revenue authority, and specialized service delivery is central to the success of special districts. Let me go ahead and repeat that. Connecting governance, revenue authority, and specialized service delivery, that is what makes special districts so special. So how about an update on the responses to the 2000 report? First, much indeed has changed since the 2000 report. The state has made numerous statutory changes to local government processes and requirements, including measures intended to further promote transparency, especially after the City of Bell scandal in 2011. And CSDA has greatly enhanced its role as a training organization, offering substantially more educational opportunities and partnering with other organizations such as the Special District Leadership Foundation and the Institute for Local Government. But let's move on to just some of the specifics. And the report covered a lot of ground. I'm going to focus in on three areas: consolidations, property taxes, and reserves. So with consolidations, this was obviously a big topic in the 2000 report. As a result, much has been done in this area to promote and enhance the LAFCO process since the report. Now, I assume that our CalLAFCO friends are going to cover most of that ground, so in the interest of time, I won't do too much other than sharing a little bit of our own perspective, which CSDA is neither pro-consolidation nor anti-consolidation. I guess you could say we're neutral consolidation, but we're pro-community and we're pro-quality local services. Now, to do that, we support a local LAFCO process that meets the following criteria. First, facilitates an open and public local process. Second, includes the input and participation of all affected parties. Third, conducts an objective analysis. And fourth, gives the residents who receive and pay for the services the final say. I think that we owe that to them. California is not a one-size-fits-all kind of state, and the needs, hopes, and desires of our communities are wide-ranging. From Modoc to Marin, from Calaveras to Costa Mesa, from San Francisco to San Bernardino, the climate, topography, socioeconomics, and political settings are simply different, and that's okay. Because they're different, it follows that these communities would choose different tools to meet their local services and infrastructure needs. Our written testimony includes the story of one of my favorite special district leaders, Lois Henry, and the Lompico County Water District. Now, this is a story of process, a story of sustainable transformation, and a story of local leadership. We believe that, in essence, that is what happens at the local LAFCO process when done well. Now let's talk about every homeowner's favorite subject, property taxes. Special districts are established by local voters, and all special district taxes and assessments are approved by voters. Statewide, voters have expressed consistent and overwhelming resolve to keep their property tax dollars local in support of the essential services their special districts provide. Property taxes establish a firm financial foundation for special districts to build the infrastructure necessary to maintain a strong economy and a healthy environment. Now, non-enterprise services like fire protection, parks and rec, mosquito abatement, and others rely primarily on property taxes. They use some user fees, but primarily property taxes. Enterprise service delivery, however, also gains invaluable benefits from property tax support. Just a few. Securing and repaying the most cost-effective bonds for infrastructure projects. Performing environmental conservation that offers a broad public benefit. Delivering certain non-enterprise functions as part of comprehensive service efforts. Some people like to just say enterprise districts and non-enterprise districts, but most districts will perform both enterprise and non-enterprise functions. Offering stable long-term rate plans, as well as rate relief when appropriate for disadvantaged residents. These are things that only property taxes can really do. One of the most notable recent examples of the indispensable value of property taxes for special districts delivering enterprise services comes from the drought plaguing California for the last 4 years. In 2015, the State Water Board began imposing mandatory conservation of up to 36%. 36% of water used by customers. The resulting reduction in water use meant a drastic cut in monthly revenue. However, a majority of water district operational costs are fixed and not dependent on water usage. If not for property tax revenue, along with the prudent reserve funds of these districts, many of our state's water providers likely would not be weathering this ongoing drought today. We should not allow this moment to pass without extracting the lesson as to the value of diversification and stability that property tax revenue offers to all special districts. So why not give property tax allocation authority to cities and counties? One of our speakers today brings that up. First of all, we disagree with the city finance consultant's written testimony that everything would be better if cities took control of all property taxes. And I will be happy to answer that question in detail. I can do that now, or we can take a pause and I can do that now, or I can continue on and come back to it.
Why don't I just use this opportunity to ask Commissioners if they have any questions at this juncture based on what
Sure.
I've heard so far.
I'm not sure if you can address this a little bit further, but around governance, since that was your first discussion point, I would love to know a little bit more about what does transparency look like in the 21st century as opposed to what it looked like back, in the 1970s and beyond just posting on a website. So that's one of the key issues that I would love to explore a little bit more. And
Sure.
How are you engaging the voters with such low voter turnout? How are we ensuring that our residents truly understand what the special districts provide to them and that they have a say in that discussion? And then lastly, it was around your trainings. Are you training just the board members of these special districts, or are you doing community trainings?
Sure. I'll try to take those one at a time. First of all, when it comes to engagement, we've been engaging in a long-term campaign with regard to increasing public awareness and engagement. And the legislature certainly has passed numerous measures. We look at in terms of just transparency and accountability, the compensation reports, the financial transaction reports. Every special district has to do an audit. All this information is posted to the web. We've also, however, been doing some efforts through the Special District Leadership Foundation. We now have a certificate of transparency. We also have a district of distinction recognition. And those require doing all sorts of different things, whether it be website or whether it actually be community outreach. One of our districts that's receiving an award at our annual conference coming up, it's a recreation park district. They're actually holding their meetings going out. Instead of just having them in a boardroom like this and posting a piece of paper on the window, they're going into their parks and flyering the neighborhood and then inviting people to just come to the park that they actually come to, and that's how they know the district is the park facility, and that's where they're holding meetings. And then they're creating advisory committees for each of the parks throughout their district in order to get that input. So it's those sorts of things. We have put up a mapping project on our website where we've actually pinpointed the headquarters of every special district, mapped about 90% of them so that people can better find their district. We've got a partnership going with the Institute of Local Government, which is a major new public engagement tool for both special district cities and counties. Their program is going to develop a new public engagement framework that will include example actions and implementation checklists and build upon ILG's existing public engagement resources, which include publications, tip sheets, and webinars. But this is through a major grant from the Hoover Foundation, and it's really exciting. I'd love to talk to you more about it later. But we believe that, yes, transparency and accountability is being open and available, but public engagement is what our special districts are really trying to do right now, which is go out and engage the public. So leave the office and go talk to them where they know the district and how they know the district. In terms of elections, that is an issue I think that all government is facing right now, to be honest. We did a little bit of statistics here just from Sacramento County. It was easy to pull up. And actually, let's see, of those voting in a race, the average percentage of voters who cast a vote that didn't leave it blank. For the special district election, it was about 70%. For school district elections, it was about 72, 73%. And for city elections, it was about 74, 75. So it's a little bit less, but it's really right about in the same ballpark. And yes, voter engagement and voter turnout is an issue that we want to help. Both election costs are also a major issue. So one thing that we've done is we actually sponsored provisions in legislation that made it easier for special districts to consolidate their elections into even year elections, because we think that does both. It reduces cost and increases turnout. And so the main problem with doing that is actually there's some county technology issues that makes it hard. So the counties have to be willing and able to do it. But does that answer some of your questions, Ms. Torres? Thank you.
Yeah, we also have some instances where cities are not on even elections, they do them on odd years. Santa Barbara does that. I think that's designed to keep turnout low. Probably cynical, I don't know. One of the other areas that I'm curious about is I think rural counties and special districts in rural counties face challenges that are different than those that are in urban areas. In part because if you're basing it on property tax, your property tax is, Miracle Mile is going to be a lot more per mile than Yuba County or Colusa County. So what do you see as how people are able to address shortfalls? If you're living in a rural county and you've got a special district and your tax base is just not the same as in other places, how do you deal with that?
Sure, and you'll find that very clearly special districts are different throughout the state. They come in all shapes and sizes and they meet all different kinds of needs. And in general, folks in the more urban coastal areas tend to have special districts that are larger and more regional in nature. They tend to cross the city and county political boundary lines in order to provide a more uniform service provision to the area, achieve economies of scale, these sorts of things. Handle those urbanized issues and challenges. The special districts in the more rural areas tend to fit the needs and wants and desires of folks in the more rural inland areas. So they tend to be smaller in nature, they tend to be more limited in scope, and they tend to address the few issues that people want government to do for them, right? So obviously you have fewer people, people tend to want to be more independent, want less government involvement, less government bureaucracy, that sort of thing. So they kind of fit the community needs and desires of politics, and so in that sense, the level of revenue funding matches up with the needs and desires. Now, if those communities do desire more government and they do want more services, they can choose to do benefit assessments, special taxes, increased fees, these sorts of things, and sometimes they do. I would say that is much more difficult for a special district to raise these taxes than it is for general purpose government, because a special tax requires a 2/3 vote, even though the electorate knows exactly where the money's going to go, whereas a general tax, like a sales tax, only requires a majority vote, even though the entity can do whatever they want with it. In that case, I'll go ahead and briefly address the property tax issue before moving on to the reserves issue, and then closing with some closing statements and some potential opportunities. So we strongly agree with several things that my colleague, Mr. Coleman, noted in his written testimony that he submitted. One, special districts are vital and effective components of California's mosaic of local government service providers. Two, local circumstances differ, service preferences and needs differ, and the ability for a community to make different choices regarding local public services is vital. Three, revenue authority should be tied at the hip with the responsibility for the services for which those taxes are intended. We agree with those. Unfortunately, we must strongly disagree with Mr. Coleman's theory on addressing the complex issues of property tax allocation, which I believe actually violates the three principles that I just stated. Unfortunately, a lot of theories break down when subjected to reality, and when tested, we believe that Mr. Coleman's theory fails on multiple levels, and I'll just include a few. One, it fails to acknowledge the lessons of history observed during the brief period of time under the Special District Augmentation Fund, when counties were in charge of property tax allocation and they began shifting revenues to backfill county needs at the expense of those community services provided by special districts. Two, it fails to consider the layers of local taxes and assessments that we just talked about, Mr. Chair, that are already built and integrated within the existing property tax allocation foundation. Would these be canceled and monies be refunded to taxpayers? Doubtful. The vast majority of winners under Mr. Coleman's new arrangement would simply spend more money. Third, it fails to protect the taxpayers of the losers as well. And let me explain. Those special districts whose property tax revenues would be diverted, these taxpayers would undoubtedly experience significant tax and fee increases by special districts struggling to meet the basic needs that they were providing with that revenue. Fourth, it fails to recognize the fact that special districts' boundaries, as I mentioned before, fit the needs of communities and regions. They don't fall neatly within the political boundaries of the cities and counties. And so this would make it impossible for a city to effectively fulfill the charge that Mr. Coleman would have them do. Fifth, it fails to uphold the will of local voters who made the community choice to create certain special districts because their city or county was not or could not provide the level of service that the people desired. Sixth, it fails to be consistent with the local control policy principles that led to the successful enactment of initiatives like Proposition 22. Now, Mr. Coleman suggests that it's necessary to have the flexibility to shift resources, but I doubt that he would suggest that it's a good idea to have the state have the flexibility to shift cities' resources to feed needs like healthcare and veterans and housing and those sorts of things. This principle doesn't add up. The linchpin to the effectiveness of special districts, which Mr. Coleman recognized in his written testimony, is their authority over revenues and expenditures, their independence. The moment that authority is subjugated to another body like the city, the district is completely undermined. It would become a virtual department of the city. And over time, local residents would likely see these funds rated for other purposes despite their clear desires. This is exactly why cities fight so hard for local funding that is independent from the state of California. Giving another body the purse strings might as well be handing them chains and shackles. He who controls, or she who controls the revenue, controls the outcomes. Therefore, turning revenue control over to cities would inherently eliminate the purpose for which voters established special districts and the foundation for their effectiveness and efficiency. And it would clearly violate the principles upon which we agree. Vital and effective components, local circumstances differ, revenue authority tied at the hip. In the close of his testimony, Mr. Coleman notes, if this was easy work, then the long-standing recommendations of policy wonks such as myself would have found their way into practice a long time ago. It could be that Mr. Coleman's idea is simply too difficult to implement. However, it may be it's just a bad idea. It may be time to set aside the grand theories and work to support and empower local agencies that have found a way to successfully serve their communities with limited resources. With that, I'll turn to reserves. For countless families, saving for a rainy day is common sense. For special districts, reserve funds are not just money in a bank. They're fundamental resources for ensuring reliable, essential services and community security. Special districts designate money towards savings for a number of important reasons. Balancing budgets, emergency preparation, affordable rates, infrastructure maintenance, credit ratings, and planning for the future. Broad brush reserve discussions in these types of forums are often reduced to what I call, and others call, the Goldilocks paradox. So the Goldilocks paradox, of course, is that reserves are always too much or too little, right? Only a case-by-case analysis can truly evaluate any given reserve level, and one must take into account the unique circumstances of each district. For example, an infrastructure-heavy district with low annual personnel costs will require a much higher reserve based on percentage of annual budget than would a personnel-intensive entity like a school district. In response to the Commission's 2000 report, CSTA formed a task force. We formed that task force in 2001, put together reserve guidelines. In 2012, we updated those reserve guidelines. They're in an attachment in your written testimony, in our written testimony before you. So what about the accusations by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association? In its written testimony, Howard Jarvis levies a number of charges with regard to special district reserves. As the basis for their argument, Jarvis cites the seemingly oversized reserve funds of a handful of special districts. We strongly disagree with their conclusions, which we found to be based on a clearly inaccurate analysis. I will also be happy to answer this question following my statement or at this time if you'd like me to address it now.
I get a yes.
Okay.
You get it.
Would you like the short version or the long version?
Probably the short version.
Okay, I'll give you the short version. Howard Jarvis claims, and I quote, governmental entities have abused the public trust by hoarding vast sums of money. They then cite a handful of specific examples as the basis for their claim. They then extrapolate these facts as the reason why special districts performing enterprise services should not receive property taxes. These assertions are alarming. And upon reading them, CSA took it upon itself to ensure they would be addressed. We quickly analyzed the numbers and contacted the districts at issue to gain a full understanding. By understanding the basis of the Howard Jarvis testimony, we now know how to address these concerns. Fortunately, I think we can nip this in the bud today by demonstrating that the information presented by Howard Jarvis is a drastic misrepresentation of the data. In fact, 76% of the reserves Howard Jarvis claims are being hoarded are not cash sums held in reserve, but rather the vast majority of this money was invested in infrastructure. It turns out these special districts have done exactly what Howard Jarvis states high-performing local agencies should do. In reference to the recent Great Recession from the 2008-12, Jarvis argues, quote, one would think that special districts would have taken advantage of the weak economy to invest in capital improvements when construction labor is less expensive. I submit to you that is exactly what special districts did, and the number Jarvis cites in its testimony ironically evidences this fact. How can this be? Well, Jarvis appears to have looked up the state controller's top 250 reserve list that was established following the 2000 Commission report. They then appear to refer to the total equity line item as a fund balance. They refer to it as a fund balance. Jarvis then appears to incorrectly infer that this is equivalent to liquid cash sitting in a bank account. Unfortunately, this is completely inaccurate. In fact, it exaggerates the actual reserves by more than 400%. Howard Jarvis, I'm giving you the short version now.
Well, let me ask a question. So,
yes,
it really is what you're talking about is a definition of reserves. And there's a nuance involved. If you call something a reserve, it ain't necessarily cash in the bank.
I'll go ahead and address that. I'll define that. So total equity includes the sum total of everything special districts are required by law to report in their statement of net position, okay? Howard Jarvis took every piece of infrastructure, every pipe, facility, road, bridge, dock, etc. Then they added every dime the district had, whether tied up in a lawsuit, committed to a construction contract, or legally obligated in some other way. Then they threw in the district's rainy day fund. Then they called this entire pile of equity the district's reserves. So that's what those numbers are. Then, when the numbers went up over time, they alleged that the districts were hoarding cash instead of spending revenues on infrastructure. But they failed to recognize that the numbers they were citing actually included all of the district's infrastructure investments. Given these facts, of course the total equity stat has gone up since the 2000 Commission report, and so did the retained earnings reserve. The districts were prudently investing in necessary infrastructure during the recession, just as Jarvis stated they should be doing.
So you're much more in common than it looks.
And sorry?
You have much more in common than it seems. Basically what you say.
Honestly, we felt that of anybody, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association would appreciate saving for future generations and prudently investing dollars in infrastructure and having dollars saved so that you don't have to just raise taxes and fees willy-nilly or borrow every dime that you want to spend. We found that...
Are you suggesting that the special districts have done a better job on infrastructure than the state of California?
I will defer to the chair's statements on that. We actually went ahead and did our own analysis of the same data, and of the top 25 districts, which is what they focused on, which was again from the Commission's 2000 report, the most recently data available was in 2015. 73% of the total assets for these districts were infrastructure, fixed assets. And only 24% of their total equity was retained earnings and reserve, which actually includes what is now referred to post-2009 GASB 54, no longer uses that phrase. It now breaks up retained earnings reserve into committed, assigned, and unassigned reserves. So it's much more specific, which is much more informative to the public if you were to refer to those numbers. But let's just assume that all of those things were, reserves. In other words, the Howard Jarvis analysis exaggerated the district's actual reserves by at least 400%. And that's giving the benefit of the doubt. Now, just to close on the reserves issue, we're all here to promote efficient and effective local services. That's what we're all doing here. It's time that we stop the shoot first, ask questions later trend that has only served to damage the relationship and trust between Californians and their government. If you ask me, the questions we should be asking, to the chair's point, are why are special districts able to manage property taxes and reserves so prudently? And how can the rest of government learn from special districts? So what opportunities are there for improvement? I think that that's what October is going to be about. And in reading through the written testimony submitted to this commission, there are several compelling opportunities to improve local services that align across multiple speakers from multiple perspectives. I would encourage the commission to consider these practical, implementable solutions where we find concurrence, instead of inviting major disruptions in local services and untold unintended consequences, including major tax or fee increases. Let's focus on the workable ideas, of which there appear to be some real potential opportunities. To name just a few of the opportunities that stand out. The state responsibility area fire fee. As discussed in the Sacramento Bee articles that we attached to our written testimony, the SRA fee has had a chilling effect on the passage of the local fire fees in those rural areas and taxes to support local fire protection efforts. The state policy of the SRA was to provide support to areas that had insufficient fire services. However, the consequence is that it has actually had a stifling effect, eventually potentially bankrupting whatever local services these areas already have. Second, recommendation 3 from the May 2000 Little Hoover Commission report. As finding 3 from the 2000 report stated, quote, research is needed that will help policymakers and community leaders know when consolidations will achieve improved efficiency and service and identify strategies for facilitating those consolidations. Policymakers also need guidelines, best practices, and access to a cadre of experts who can provide technical assistance and training. This concept has merit, and CSDA would be interested in partnering in such a program. Third, special district representation on LAFCOs. CSDA supports and encourages special district representation on LAFCOs. One potential opportunity to facilitate the successful local adoption of district representation on the remaining 28 LAFCOs would be to remove some of the red tape associated with the current process. We include a suggestion in our written statements. Other notable potential opportunities, we list many more. I'll just note state grant funding for LAFCO studies, Secretary of State roster of public agencies, and modernization of principal acts. We think there's a lot of in common across the speakers in those areas. In conclusion, Mr. Chair and members, I would like to reiterate that despite what some may suggest, much has occurred since the Commission's 2000 report. But what I would like to leave you with is the reminder of what's so special about special districts. What makes special districts an effective and efficient form of local governance is the empowerment of local service specialists with the revenue and budget authority. When you empower the specialists with the authority, combined with the resources necessary to get the job done, they will do it in a focused manner that results in efficiency and effectiveness. They will be more prudent, more innovative, and more sustainable. As this commission moves forward to its next hearing, let's not undermine this unique and invaluable tool, the independent special district that local voters throughout California have established to make a difference in their communities. Let's instead work together to strengthen these local service specialists. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you. Any other questions by the Commission? Yes.
I just have a quick question to follow up on the reserve issue. Do any excess reserves actually exist?
I think, Mr. Varner, to answer that question, I would say it's appropriate to do a case-by-case analysis of a specific district. And that's what our special district reserve guidelines encourage districts to develop those policies within their district with engagement with their community and to come up with capital improvement plans and these sorts of things so that you can actually see what those monies are being set aside for. Is it for emergencies? Is it for, in the case here in Sacramento County, I'm a customer of Sac Regional Sand. They're building the ECHO project that you might be familiar with. And this is hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that's due to recent state regulations and findings that they need to upgrade to tertiary for the Sacramento River. And they've engaged in an aggressive capital improvement program to meet that. And so, of course, they've saved up reserves in order to address that. If you just looked at it out of context and you just looked at a spreadsheet without the context there, you might come to that conclusion. But that's why again, I argue that it could be true. I don't have any personal examples. Certainly the examples in the Howard Jarvis testimony, I think we've demonstrated are inaccurate and misapplied. But I would encourage anybody to take a look at the publicly available data and address that on a case-by-case basis.
And I assume with your public outreach, you're empowering residents to look at that and determine if there is a proper plan for reserves. And in the case if there's not a plan for capital improvements or long-term strategies with reserves and there is deemed in excess, what would be the solution to reducing that?
Sure. The solution would be addressing it with your local board, first and foremost, and speaking with the board and encouraging the board and engaging the board and having that accountable community dialogue that needs to happen. Now, what CSDA is doing about it is that our classes through our professional development programs have been ramping up and ramping up. We've left some of the numbers in your written testimony there, but we are doing classes both for board members and for managers and staff. So it's 2 different levels. We're bringing in finance experts and we're teaching them about how to do these sorts of things and how to report them and why it's important and what these capital improvement programs are. We have chapter meetings where districts can network and share information and share ideas and share samples. We have a listserv where they can do that. We've produced guidelines like the Special District Reserve guidelines trying to encourage that. Certainly, we need to keep working on this and we need to keep pressing to make sure they're doing a good job. But I think that if you look at the districts that were just highlighted by Howard Jarvis, and you looked at the programs that they're doing and the efficiencies and improvements by which they're investing, I think they are great examples of what special districts should be doing and what all government ought to be doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
No further questions. I want to thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff, and thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Our next witnesses are Amber King. She's the Senior Legislative Advocate for the Association of California Healthcare Districts, where she directs legislative efforts on behalf of the state's 78 healthcare districts. Michael Schwartz is the Fire Chief of the North Tahoe Fire Protection District, overseeing fire protection of 32 square miles on the north and west shores of Lake Tahoe. The district serves approximately 11,000 households and 1,000 businesses. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. You want to go first, Ms. King?
Good morning, Chairman and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning to speak about the role and governance and opportunities for healthcare districts. I'm here today to discuss the overall environment of healthcare, both on the state and federal level, and how healthcare districts fit into that environment, the challenges that healthcare districts face, both as healthcare providers and as local government entities, and the work that ACHD is doing to provide, to better position our districts to face those challenges. The 79 healthcare districts throughout the state play an integral role in the overall healthcare system in the state. And in some places, they are the sole source of health and medical care in their communities. Each district is unique in their functions, but all are focused on improving the health of the citizens that they serve. The legislature recognized this change, The role of the districts has changed over the past few years. This is something that we were asked to address in our written comments, and we did extensively, so I'm going to summarize that a little bit here. The role of the districts has changed in parallel with the health industry, and in fact, the legislature recognized this change in 1994 and amended the Healthcare District Enabling Act from hospital district to healthcare district. As you know, the state administers the Medi-Cal program and Covered California, which provides limited funding in rural areas where many of our districts operate. Under state law, counties have a broad mandate to provide care to indigent adults, which is met in a manner of ways that varies from county to county. There is no mandate for counties or any other local agency to provide direct health services or operate facilities. Healthcare districts are flexible enough to fill some of these gaps by providing critical services and access to care in areas that otherwise would not exist. In fact, more than a third of our district hospitals provide 30% of their care to low-income Californians, and some up to 50%. The Affordable Care Act is reshaping healthcare delivery and payment for services away from hospitals and toward preventative and primary care in outpatient settings, improvements to quality, cost, and population health. Hospitals and health systems are rethinking their approach to care, including services beyond the hospital walls. Non-hospital services provided by healthcare districts will become increasingly important as Medicaid reimbursements shift to value and outcomes-based over the next 5 years. Likewise, districts without hospitals are rethinking their services and investments to fit into the population health lens of the ACA. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail about the ACA and the most recent Medicaid waiver. The state of California and federal government recognize the important role of the healthcare districts, specifically district hospitals, when they negotiated its most recent Medicaid waiver last year. It marked the first time that district hospitals will be directly participating in targeted improvement projects. The waiver includes $6.2 billion in federal funding for the next 5 years, including $460 million for district hospitals. Consistent with state goals, district hospitals will begin transformation work to improve outcomes and increase efficiencies. Additionally, districts without hospitals are filling gaps in prevention and non-hospital services to underserved populations. And I'll give you just one quick example that was included in our written material. The Los Medanos Healthcare District in Pittsburgh, California, that does not own or operate a hospital, has been sponsoring a community benefit program for the past 3 years in response to low birth weight rates and high infant mortality among African American and low-income populations. This project directly addresses the health disparities identified in their community and improves birth outcomes through prenatal and lactation services. I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the challenges that are facing healthcare districts today. I went very in detail in our written material, so I'm not going to belabor the points, but I did want to summarize those for you today. Healthcare districts are currently facing a number of challenges, especially including the financial climate that is facing all healthcare providers, especially those in rural areas. Chairman, you had mentioned the differences between rural and urban districts, and this is very apparent for our districts that operate in rural areas. There is definitely challenges in achieving the viable care mix to ensure survivability of a standalone hospital, especially those in rural areas where funding is limited. Recruitment and retention of physicians, not only for our rural facilities, which is they're experiencing unique issues with recruitment of physicians in those areas, but also a maldistribution statewide of those physicians that are highly concentrated in urban areas.
I have a question, and it's likely to rise out of somebody. There was an issue with respect to employment of physicians.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about
Yes, thank you very much for that question. District hospitals are the only public providers in the state of California that are prohibited by state law from directly employing physicians. This is something that the association has worked on for many years in the past. There is a bill this year that we are supporting. It's a bill by Assemblymember Jim Wood, AB 2024. And this, on a pilot basis, would allow district critical access hospitals, of which 20 are district hospitals. There's 34 statewide critical access hospitals to employ physicians on a pilot basis, with the report back to OSHPD at the end of that pilot.
So the Wood bill, what's the status of that since we're looking at about the last few days?
Yeah, that bill is currently on the Senate floor.
Okay,
It will have to go back to the Assembly floor.
thank you.
And then the two other challenges that I wanted to touch on today are recent legislation this year that is aimed at dissolving or otherwise managing district governance without a local conversation first, and the need to further improve community engagement and oversight of healthcare districts. In response to these challenges, ACHD has initiated a statewide working group comprised of trustees and executives from our healthcare districts, as well as state association partners that we work with here in Sacramento. The working group has already identified a number of potential opportunities for the ACHD board to consider, and we will have our final meeting next week to finalize those strategies. Some of the strategies that have been discussed include modernizing the healthcare district law to require districts to provide a community needs assessment and community benefits report, enhance the relationship between LAFCOs and healthcare districts statewide to ensure proper municipal service reviews, as well as additional efforts aimed at educating the community and legislature on healthcare districts. In closing, healthcare districts play a crucial role in the healthcare delivery system in our state and provide local, flexible, and responsive solutions to filling healthcare gaps. I look forward to working with the commission staff on finding ways to empower our healthcare districts to fulfill their mission of improving their healthcare, the healthcare of the communities to their fullest extent. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions, Commissioners?
Healthcare districts, can they use that funding for telemedicine or building out infrastructure to ensure that a delivery through communication, otherwise not available in rural areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a lot of our rural districts are focused on telehealth. There are some challenges with funding through the Medicaid program with some of those, and also just finding the specialty care and finding the network. So for the rural schools, making sure they have a connection to the urban areas. But that is utilized in a lot of our rural facilities.
Is there any special concentration, or, you know, is there an initiative to make this happen as a solution for delivery of rural services?
There's not a statewide effort per se. There are, in different facilities, they're working on different areas. Some of them are working on stroke, some of them on mental health, using telehealth for mental health, as well as doing some triage in the emergency rooms, as well as they're using, in even some of our urban facilities, they're using telehealth in the ICU for 24-hour care.
I'm curious whether or not the organization, the parent organization, do you compile statistics on patient ethnicity? Or is that,
We do not compile,
is something supposed to somewhere?
that is a great question. I would have to do a little bit more research to find out if that's something that is reported to OSHPD. I don't know
Okay.
the answer to that.
Do you know whether the respective districts have a requirement to compile information based on patient ethnicity?
There is not a specific requirement for districts, or that I know of
Right.
hospitals, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Well, I just think that given what we're seeing as it relates to climate change, greenhouse gas, air resources board, and an increased emphasis on a more equitable delivery of services to all of the people of the state, particularly as it relates to something that is so important as healthcare, that might be something that your organization might want to start taking a look at. Because undoubtedly, if you're serving areas of low income, you're going to probably have a fair number of people of color. And that might be helpful in terms of making the argument.
Great, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yep.
I have a question, because I was looking through the materials and perhaps I just couldn't locate it. Do you have, did you include the membership of your statewide working group in this
I
material?
did not, but I'd be happy to provide that to you. That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Fire Chief.
Well, good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, you know what, thank you for inviting me. I'm a little too loud there, sorry. I'll push that back. Yeah, Chairman Nava and Director Elia, if I said that correctly. No, I feel a little outgunned, you know, I'm the only, I'm not an advocate, and I just run a fire department. In fact, one of my favorite little sayings is I'm just a firefighter trying to run a fire department here. But I do have 34 years in the business, mostly in fire districts. So I'm honestly prejudiced towards fire districts, and I get to talk about it with you because that's my favorite topic to talk about, and I think that I can share some of the reasons I really love fire districts as a fire chief. And I'm not going to by any means say there aren't great city fire departments and county fire departments, because we all know there are. And there's some really outstanding special district fire departments, and there's some that aren't so great. And I think we can talk about that. You know, I think it's good to have that open discussion. Before I get into my prepared notes, which I'm going to deviate, this is like a squirrel chaser. Squirrel! I'm going off. You talked a little bit about transparency, and I was kind of snickering. So North Tahoe, and you have my written comments, so I don't want to go too much into the details of North Tahoe, but I think it makes kind of a good example to talk about. Because we're first of all made up of two little teeny districts, so we're like half volunteer, half paid, and we became this one fire department in North Tahoe, and then we would service two other districts in our contracts. And what that kind of gets you as a big picture is, first, as a fire chief, gets you 15 bosses. And so I talk about transparency, you know, a community of like 20,000 people day in, day out, with maybe another 20 to 50,000 visitors on a nice, warm day. You get a lot of, in representation, we get a lot of community people coming in, you get a lot of interaction. In fact, when things are really contentious, you can't go to the post office without kind of really getting it. So I think we're right there with the people, and you really get what they want. And I think we provide the services of real value. So that's kind of part of my testimony. But I thought it was an interesting piece when you mentioned earlier is, you know, how many people want 15 bosses as a fire chief? But I really like my board, so I'm really pleased to talk to you about it. I mentioned that there's 346 fire districts, and so I'm just one, and I'm very pleased. And so most of my comments are my personal comments. but I really want to share candidly with you because I think I can give you a perspective that advocates can't give you. They're great speakers and they're great organizations, but it's a little different. Not, really not. But I think I have a different perspective because I live it every day. And with that, I hope you can extrapolate some of my lessons, and for all the general managers that are out there and sort of representing indirectly too, that are in special districts, they all, I'm sure, have similar characteristics. You know, you talked to Nani about what's changing. The first thing to talk about what's changing is, you know, you mentioned climate change. Well, we're on fire. I mean, anybody who lives in California, Nevada, or the 12 western states kind of notice that we're on fire a lot more. It's a lot more expensive. I currently have engines and strike teams out myself, 10 from the basin, 1 from North Tahoe. We're out there doing this right now. To kind of get back to the business piece for just a second, and the reason I love special districts, as I talked about, is we're single focused. I'm just a fire chief. I'm a firefighter that worked his way up the ranks. I still carry a paramedic license. In fact, I'm probably better off taking care of you on a heart attack than I am giving this testimony. But, you know, we're very good at what we do. And the nice thing about being a fire district fire chief is everything I do is about fire protection, prevention. We do some forestry work too. You know, I don't have to, and when my budget comes up from my board and they approve my budget, it doesn't have a line item that I'm competing with. And this is, you know, is it Zumba or is it firefighter RIT training? You know, and when you're in a city or county sometimes, my fire chief friends go, oh, I can't believe I lost out on this training opportunity. The people in North Tahoe and Meeks Bay, they give us a set amount of money and we give them value. I think. We try to give them value to fire protection, to life safety, and they expect us to go out there and also look for other funds to supplement their property taxes. And I think North Tahoe, we're really good at that. We go out and try what I call recapture federal tax dollars. You know what that means? Grants. And we're out there. We're after SRA grants. We're out after federal grants. And I think that's part of the duty of a responsible fire chief now, is to go out there and try to capitalize not just on your ad valorem revenues, but all those other revenue streams that you need to do in this world to be an effective fire district. Just to North Tahoe's piece and talk a little bit about efficiency. 80% of our income does come from some form of property tax. We have special assessments and such. The other 20% is made up of all types. We have some enterprise funds. We do some enterprise work through our fuels management and our fire prevention bureau, as well as we run the EMS service. We are a transport EMS service. Those are all things we do. And I mentioned in my testimony a little bit how that's become a little more complicated depending on your payer mix these days. With, you know, if you're picking up more patients that have mandatory write-downs, Medicare, Medi-Cal, such, it's getting hard. And so I think you're starting to see even some of the larger fire departments be really impacted, where you have a projected revenue stream from EMS, and now with the change in healthcare, you get more bills paid but less money, and that's starting to become a little bit of a challenge. So it kind of paints the big picture of, I think, what we're getting up against. And you know, you kind of asked us, Amber and I, to talk a little bit about changing, so I'll get into that changing, because that's one of those pieces of change I think that we all have to be aware of. Also for efficiency is, you know, 70% of our monies, our collective fees, goes to pay salaries. You cannot put out fires without firefighters. It's just that simple. You know, and in order to do it, you can buy, you gotta have fire trucks and you gotta have fire stations. But at the end of the day, what puts fires out is firefighters. And so wages is a big piece of that. And, you know, we're very conscientious of that we need to have enough firefighters to be able to do the job we're asked to do and to provide the services. So, you know, I think that's at that point of being very, very efficient in what we do. In fact, you know, and I may not be 100% accurate on this, but I think we put up a pretty good efficiency model with our shared services arrangements that we have, that I can provide services to a community about as cost effective as almost anybody providing like services, and even to the point of CAL FIRE Schedule A contracts. I think, you know, that's used oftentimes as measures, you know, what does CAL FIRE going to do, what can they do a rural arrangement for, and I actually can compete with that. So I think it really speaks to how efficient we're running our fire district and our economies of scale by doing these contracts. And I think that's something that we should continue to look at in the future. You know, I think
Let me ask you a question if you raise something. So, are there instances where you have CAL FIRE competing with special districts for contracts for service?
I think that, not in my particular case, no, but has that occurred? Yes. And I think it's been a concern in some areas that you do have state resources. And I think competing may not be the exact right word, but yeah, they're looking at providing service to an area that's underserved and needs to change its service type. And the state has a model, and the local governments have a model, whether it's city, county, or special district. in my case, and I think that's actually why I'm really happy to be here, is I have a CAL FIRE station. We lease a station in CAL FIRE right in the middle of my district. This is going to be talking about what we're good at even. What we're really good at is working with other agencies. Fire districts are really excellent at working with federal partners and state partners and counties. And to give you an example, picture Lake Tahoe, 2 states, all right? I think there's 6 counties, there's 8 different fire agencies, and I have a boundary drop agreement. Are you familiar with that term? Is that something not helpful? Okay, so everybody knows about mutual aid contract. You call me, hey, I come. Then there's auto aids where you kind of build in yourself. Well, the newer version of this, and I think it's the model, is boundary drops, where we sit down as fire chiefs and our boards and we go, hey, not only are we going to help each other, we're going to pretend these borders don't exist. Even the California-Nevada state border, I run equipment across that border every single day. And my neighbor to the east does too, and we go back and forth. We could not operate the efficient operation we do if we couldn't just have this free flowing of equipment and personnel. And at the end of the day, that saves taxpayers money because we're shifting as demand goes back and forth. And we're even doing things that people said you couldn't do, and that's actually my love. When somebody tells me I can't do something as a fire chief, it's like, I don't know, I'm going to prove to you we can. So we have contracts in place where we're treating California federal lands with agreements between multi-states to come in and bring our hand crews across. They said, how could you ever do this? Well, we just have layers and layers and layers of contracts. And at the bottom line, we're fire chiefs. And if we shake our hands and say, we're going to do this and this is how we're going to do it, we do it. That word is really important. So I think we're a model for government. I think that people should be able to do that. And, really next week is the Lake Tahoe Summit. The president's going to be there. Senator's going to be there. We're going to talk about this exact thing. I'm going to sit with my partners at that meeting from the Forest Service, and we're going to talk about the amount of air we treated together, using federal, state, local tax dollars all together. And I think that's a really good model of how we should do business. And I don't think it can be much more efficient. And the state does participate in those boundary drops, to your question, is that they work really collaboratively with us. We have a great relationship with our local unit. But yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your question. Sorry about that. Squirrel. The changing that goes, going into the point of the changing thing is, fire districts also have, and you can tell from me, that we have a lot of civic pride. And so sometimes it's hard as you go these, why are you doing contracts, and why aren't you going through LAFCO processes at times? It takes a little bit of time. You got to really win over civic pride. You can't just go, hey, I want to take this fire district, and make this new fire district. If civic pride is something we've tried to build in government for such a long time, and it goes back to your transparency piece, and if we just ignore that, they're not successful consolidations. We're in this process for the long haul, and when our boards are ready to go through that LAFCO process, we're going to do that. We've agreed to start studying that on those things, and if there's additional savings through that we should do that. But I argue in a lot of these cases, we're already achieving almost all of the efficiencies by doing what we're doing, and you're not going to achieve that much more unless you can, come by county and get out your ERAS, for example, or there's some type of tax advantage you're going to bring to the table that you don't have otherwise. We're picking up the majority of that, so we are functionally consolidated, not only with our contracts, but I would argue with all of our boundary drops. The changing thing, I think, is this. This is what I'm seeing, and I'm in 2 rural counties, Placer and El Dorado. Those rural ones that you talked about, and I think you mentioned Yolo, if that was correct. Those smaller fire districts that are in those rural counties that have old tax rate areas, and I'm no expert on the tax code. I mentioned a little bit of some of the challenges that come with Prop 13 and AB 8, and truthfully, I worked in Nevada for a lot of years, and we didn't have those same challenges. So being a special district fire chief in California is a little more difficult than it was in Nevada, it's a complex issue, but I am watching really good people, really good fire chiefs, really good fire districts, really struggling to find a sustainable revenue stream. And as part of my discussion was whether, there's a appetite to change how the SRAP is being administered. In other words, CAL FIRE, very little that's going back through the special districts. And even though, full disclosure, the first year we did pretty well on grants, second year not quite so much. The more that can go back to districts that are doing that work themselves, I think that would be an effective model to give them a stream of revenue that might strengthen their ability to provide services in those really rural areas. Without that, I'll be honest, without that or some other idea of how to have a revenue stream from those smaller districts, I think there's not a good road for those people. I think those fire districts are really in a difficult situation. And I think even forcing consolidations and mergers and things is not going to be a successful answer at some of these at this point. And I kind of use the example of, and I won't give any names here, you take a mediocre cell company and another mediocre cell company merge, what do you get? A large mediocre cell company. I don't think that's going to be the answer for small fire districts in rural communities. I think we actually have to find a revenue stream that's dedicated specifically to them, and then basically have a process of best practices to try to form some type of shared services or consolidation annexations. But
I think probably the people in this room are more sophisticated and have experience with it. But I learned a few years ago for the first time that when you have a fire in your area and firefighters set up their command facilities, that part of it is dedicated to the bookkeeper. And that there is a firefighter bookkeeper who has a spreadsheet on a laptop and who is entering in the hourly rates for various pieces of equipment that are being used, and costs connected to materials that are being expended. And at the end of it, there is an accounting. There are real numbers that then have to be assigned to somebody with an invoice to be paid.
correct.
And I got a feeling that there's an awful lot of members of the public who are absolutely in the dark about it, and are under the assumption that when there's a fire, it gets put out, and that's the end of it. And are very happy for the protection that they receive and that their property receives. But there's a real disconnect between the delivery of the service and paying for the service.
That's correct.
And so maybe part of what the conversation should be is there ain't nothing free. And that might help, I think. Because I don't think people understand, I didn't,
Right.
that when you contract for a bulldozer to cut a line, you're paying somebody per hour for the equipment. And it's not a firefighter necessarily operating that piece of equipment, it's a civilian. And you're reimbursing that contractor for the expense of doing that work. And I just don't think most people understand all of the nuances that go into providing fire.
No, I think that's partly our own fault. You know, I think that firefighters, the very nature of ourselves, first of all, is we like to just ignore the money piece altogether. And we know we can't, especially as a fire chief. You know, I have to prepare my preliminary budgets, and I have to justify my engines going to mutual aid calls across the state of California to my taxpayers. And that's part of what I have to do. I have to make sure I provide them their services. But I think you're right. I think part of it, we haven't done a good job as fire chiefs as well, as always making that clear to the public, because we want to provide the best service we can to people, regardless of the amount of money they give us, and they give us less, and we just work harder. And you know, I think it's reached a point though in those rural communities where I think we're going to start to see failures if we don't have some type of stream. And theirs isn't a good one, honestly. You know, that it's hard to. SRA killed this. You know, it wasn't intentional. SRA, okay, you can't pass a benefit assessment. You see the tax bill looks like it comes from all the government. Every time they come out, you know, the taxpayers stop me on every corner and go, I can't believe I have to pay this $116, you know, and they think that money goes to us. And you know, I'm really glad that CAL FIRE has an engine in there, but that money is actually fire prevention money. It doesn't actually help that engine there. But I think it's really created difficulty for the small districts. And while North Tahoe's doing pretty good, I think a lot of my neighbors and friends aren't. And I'm really concerned. That's really why I'm here. And thanks you. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I would like to comment that I would take that a step further. I think there is a confusion by taxpayers, by residents, of how they're being taxed, period. Not just about special districts or specifically around fire special districts. I think overall, we get we pay our taxes and we assume that everything's going to be taken care of by that lump sum that we're getting. So when we're getting these extra, why is this? So I think there's a general lack of education about how we're being taxed in, well, not only in California, but probably in the United States overall. So I think it's a larger conversation when we look at these issues and understanding specifically special districts about how we're explaining this to the everyday person that doesn't have the luxury to come to a public hearing, to take time off from work, and really spend some time to really think through this, right? That they're working 2 jobs and they're trying to figure out, why am I getting taxed again? That's a larger conversation that, you know, we really need to understand. Because to your point, you're doing fantastic work, and we do have to pay for it. I don't think anyone thinks they're getting it for free. I think they're all thinking, we've already paid for this.
No,
And that's larger.
In fact, today I was watching the news, I don't know if you saw, the Sac Metro was on the news this morning, they were talking about their fire response fee. And it's like $275 to come out and see you. And on the one hand, you're hearing the customer going, I don't understand why I had to pay this $275 fee, I was hit by a car. And on the other side of this is your Sac Metro is, look, we don't have any way to pay for this part of our service. And so that is really the example of the issue we're up against is, how do we fund this service? And people's expectation it is completely covered with, their private property taxes. I see, North Tahoe on my property tax bill, and I have this, sorry. And I'm almost done here. I'm just going to talk. I want to touch a couple little points. I think it's probably worth noting. In a lot of senses, we do play well with other agencies, and we have a lot of our budget shifted away. And I mentioned it in my written testimony. And we do pay a big chunk of ERAP. My district, almost $1 million. Out of our budget is shifted away, and people think, I pay my property taxes to North Tahoe Fire, and then a big piece of it goes away to educational. The other part is sales tax. If you're coming from another state, there's like 2 states in the United States that makes the fire departments pay tax on their fire trucks, and we're one of them. So I go to order a fire truck. I'm next to my Nevada neighbor. This is a true story. I bought 2 fire trucks. My neighbor next door bought 2 fire trucks. Just coming out of the recession. We hadn't bought anything for a long time. We really need fire trucks. They're about $1 million for 2 fire trucks, but I got to pay 7.5% sales tax. That's a lot of money on $1 million. And my next door neighbor gets to buy another piece of apparatus. And so, I've been behind this sales tax thing. It's a personal thing for me. But that you talk about shifting money, and then the RDAs, they're not gone yet. The RDAs are still there, and their successor agencies. When they stop taking the money out of my budget, they're gone. Right now, I'm still don't need the RDAs for $850,000 a year too. Go ahead.
So what are the other things that you pay sales tax on that I mean?
We pay sales tax on everything. Special district, we're not exempt. And coming from Nevada, where I spent a lot of time, we didn't pay sales tax, and so it was quite a wake up when I came to California and bought my first large app purchases and realized that I was paying sales tax, and then gave testimony twice in assembly and got behind a bill from Senator Anderson trying to get some relief on that, and everybody sounds great, but the Department of Finance doesn't necessarily agree with that.
Got it.
And that's really kind of a good place to wrap up my testimony. I think I've covered all the things I wanted to. I'll answer any other questions you have. I just really appreciate you inviting a practitioner up here and letting me talk a little bit about my opinions, and hopefully we can find a road forward. I think districts are a good model. I think there's some great, it comes to mind, Sac Metro is one of a very large district. There's some very small ones where I think North Tahoe is kind of the in-between. There's economy of scale. There's a piece where whether you're doing contracts or you're doing consolidations, wisely done consolidations, there is an economy of scale, and I've seen that over time, that you get to a certain point where you really are efficient, where you have enough staff to do everything. The finance, I have a CPA. I'm a large enough organization that I have a pretty good, well-developed admin that we can do grants. If you're a one-man fire chief and you're trying to do all those things and trying to get all this stuff, it's a very difficult task.
Chief Schwartz, first and foremost, I know it's been a challenging few couple of years, and I actually live in Southern California. We're going through a blue cut fire right now. So I want to thank you and all the firefighters of California for all you do, putting your lives on the line to protect people and property in the state. So thank you very much. I'm one of those people that pay the $117 fee, and I'm not exactly sure what it's for. Can you explain what?
I'm going to do my very best, but it's not a tax. Howard Jarvis people are here, right? It was a very cleverly written bill, and it's a fire prevention fee, and it's supposed to be used for fire prevention activities. And so, I think what the output of that is that you see the most is defensible space inspectors from the state. A fair amount of work's been done in fire prevention and fuels management and stuff. And they are doing a lot of good stuff, but I think that, speaking of the SAC-B article, there's a fair amount of money not getting spent. And I've heard, I don't know if it's their official comment, but I've certainly heard multiple comments, even from Cal Fire themselves, that says, look, I wish there was a way that we could pass some of this money through to some local districts who are actually doing the work. North Tahoe is a good example. We have been in a fuels management business for 15 or 20 years. This isn't new to us. We have defensible space inspectors. I'm a forester. I have 4 fuels crews. I participate in fuels crews that are out there treating property all day long. We have for years. We build piles, we burn, we do prescribed fire. And we've been doing it for a long time. So, I think having some additional, I think some of the defensible space work done is great, but for fire districts particularly, they're already doing exactly that. I think that $117 fee is sort of an insult, and I think we could do it more efficiently if that money did come to the local districts.
So look, I'm unfamiliar with the specifics of that fee, but you're saying that the legislation was drafted in such a way that it was identified as to be used for fire prevention services. Did it identify who the money was to go to?
Yeah, it goes to CAL FIRE.
Okay, so it was...
They do, they have a grant piece of that. There's a certain percentage that was identified to be grants, but there's no direct way for that money to actually get down to districts other than applying for grants.
Okay, so the money goes to CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE then theoretically has a grant program where districts like yourself can apply for the money. So, do you know whether or not the legislature has its oversight activities where there have been reports that have been issued with respect to how the money gets spent, who gets it and how much and where it goes?
There's an accounting I'm not familiar with. Who does their cost spending?
Well, that would be something we should find out. Because I do think that when you have revenues that are raised that are not applied in a manner where the public sees the benefit, that undermines the trust in the overall process, which suggests to me that's where the need for special districts was born. People in their communities who are paying the taxes, who are seeing things not get done, who decide we have to figure out how to do this on our own because we're not getting help.
I would agree with you on that. And not that the state isn't doing good work. They are doing a lot of good work, but I think they haven't even been able to spend the funds that they've raised. And it'd be nice if there was an easier way to get those funds directly down to people doing the work for local community education.
Mm-hmm. And we certainly don't want you to feel overlooked. And thank you for your testimony, because I do think that the role that you play. And I was one who raised the question of how your folks are going to participate under the Affordable Care Act. And so I think we've got some more to talk about that. I want to thank you both very much for your testimony.
Thank you for your...
Our next panel includes Pamela Miller. She's the Executive Director of the California Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions, a member organization representing 57 of the 58 LAFCOs in California. John Leopold is the chair of the California Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions, a member of the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors, and a member of the Santa Cruz County Local Agency Formation Commission. Stephen Lucas is the executive officer for the California Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions and the Cruz County Local Agency Formation Commission. Welcome.
Well, Ms. Miller, what happened to Lee?
I beg your pardon,
What happened to Lee in California? Do you see it? I have a friend who lives in Santa Barbara who said, you make sure you ask him.
Well, I think we have somebody in the audience who might be able to better answer that than I.
Okay. We'll get to that. Thank you, and welcome to all three.
Thank you, Chair Nava, members of the commission. Just so you don't have to guess, even though you have a 50-50 chance of guessing who's here, this is Chair Leopold, and this is Executive Officer Steve Lucas. And I do want to point out that actually Cal LAFCO represents all 58 LAFCOs in the state. San Francisco was the last to form a LAFCO, and Tehama LAFCO, who had been around a long time, was the last to actually join Cal LAFCO a couple years ago. So we're very proud to say that we represent all 58 LAFCOs. We also appreciate the opportunity to provide information to you about LAFCOs, who we are, what we do, and express the unique relationship between LAFCOs and special districts. My comments this morning will focus on three main points. We gave you a very extensive written testimony, 19 pages on August 8th, but we're going to focus on what's changed since 2000 and how that's affected LAFCOs. We're going to talk about MSRs in relation to district reorganization as you requested, as well as state overrides and local control as you requested. These two gentlemen have close to 30 collective years of LAFCO practical experience, so they bring to the table the practitioner point of view, and so can offer the practitioner point of view as we go through our discussions. So LAFCOs are really a unique entity. We're the only state in the country with anything like them. And in 1963, the legislature was on the cutting edge of community planning when they created LAFCOs. Imagine the California landscape today without them. It's not a pretty picture. Since 1963, the governing landscape of LAFCOs has evolved considerably, especially since your commission's 2000 report. The original charge of LAFCO was very limited in scope. They were simply to review and approve or disapprove proposals to move jurisdictional boundaries, to incorporate cities, and to create special districts. Over time, responsibilities were added to consider and plan for future growth areas, to conduct municipal service reviews, we refer to these MSRs, which evaluate functions, service delivery, finances, and governance of a service provider, in order to update a sphere of influence, or SOI. Today, this is required every 5 years or as necessary, and the MSR has grown to contain determinations on 7 primary categories. LAFCOs are no longer a quiet, predictable last step in the development process. We're at the center of many compelling issues. In my written testimony, I stressed that the evolution of the role and responsibility of LAFCOs through the years has far outpaced the evolution of the resources available to LAFCO to meet these increasing legislative demands. And the structure and the resources to implement these additional responsibilities has, for the most part, been unchanged. And so I want to use an interesting, since we're a little lighthearted this morning, and a lighthearted analogy to make my point. So in 1963, when LAFCOs were created, the legislator gave us a beautiful new Rambler to drive on a very limited route with a small number of passengers. Imagine that 63 Rambler tooling along, adding a passenger here and there, and having the route to drive increase along the way over 37 years. Then in 2000, we find ourselves being directed to take on a lot of new passengers and drive new places that our Rambler was not designed for, and at performance standards well beyond its original engineering capability. Without the benefit of resources to meet the new legislative requirements, such as seat belts, car seats, proper tires, and all those new emission standards. By the time 2016 rolls around, we see the cars still driving on the roads, fuller than ever before, overflowing, stuff hanging out of the windows, and it looks as though the tires may even be falling off, or at least there certainly is no spare. And there appears to be some things hanging off the bumper. You see the passengers, our passengers, cities, counties, and special districts, are pooling their money in the hopes of getting a new tune-up. And yet, amidst all of that, somehow LAFCOs are finding a way to get things done with any and all resources we can find. Imagine what LAFCOs could do today if the state provided us with a new 4x4 SUV to take that drive. The second main point I want to address is your request for information on the fundamentals of the MSR process in relation to the reorganization of districts. MSRs and SOIs are considered long-term planning tools. Ensuring proper resources to accomplish them is critical to the health and well-being of each community being served. A point of great importance that we want to make with respect to MSRs and the reorganization of districts is that ultimately LAFCO does not have the authority to mandate a district take action. We must always recognize and respect that a special district board is locally elected, and as such, they're accountable to its constituents when making local decisions. Through the MSR, however, LAFCOs can and do make recommendations, both for certain kinds of changes of reorganization or the dissolution of a district, or more operational in nature. As noted on pages 10 and 11 of our written testimony, we gave you a number of examples of those recommendations and their varied outcomes, in particular those related to reorganizations and dissolutions. It's important to note that the operational recommendations, such as addressing governance, managerial, and financial, since we're talking a lot about finances, those concerns, for those operational types of recommendations, LAFCO lacks the authority to ensure implementation. What our leverage is, our only leverage is to deny an agency's desire to grow when they come to LAFCO and request a boundary change. And if there's no desired change, there's no leverage. That being said, LAFCOs do make strong recommendations and take the initiative to dissolve or reorganize districts, despite what is being said that we don't. The many examples that I provided to you in our written testimony help paint a picture for you for those actions and the varied outcomes. As we heard earlier, the reality is that a district reorganization is best accomplished at the local level, not when it's dictated by the state, regardless of how well-intentioned that dictation may be. When all local stakeholders are actively involved in the process, there's an opportunity for shared understanding of purpose, of commitment, and ultimately of action. And that shared purpose creates an outcome that is systemic and sustainable. And I think we heard the fire chief address sustainable as well. Mr. Peckham mentioned in his testimony the Lompico reorganization. Commissioner Leopold was actually on the Santa Cruz LAFCO during that 3-year-long process. That was a 3-year process. And I know he's happy to share that experience from a local perspective. The scars, yes, he'll share his scars. But it's important to note that this is an example of how locally generated change works. It takes time, it's thoughtful, it's deliberate, and it's transparent. And that's exactly how the legislature designed the LAFCO process. And it also takes resources. So I'm happy to pause and have him share that experience, or we can do that at the end.
Thank you, Ms. Miller, and thank you to the Commission for asking for our testimony. The representative from CSDA talked about Lois Henry, who's a very spunky elected official. The Lompico Water District is a very small district. It only has 500 hookups. But it fell into great disrepair. It has the highest water rates in our county. It was identified by the state as one of the 117 that might run out of water a couple of years ago. And Lois came to LAFCO because when she got elected, because she recognized that there was a big problem and didn't know how to fix it. Through a series of contested elections, the Lompico Water Board decided they did want to merge with another district. They had to deal with the fact that the general manager had to be let go. He had dropped out of the CalPERS system without paying the financial responsibilities, so that little district was saddled with maybe $1 million debt, which they didn't have the ability to pay. And LAFCO came in and helped identify a partner. We actually had a special district member on our board from the San Lorenzo Valley Water District who helped encourage conversations about merging the two districts together. That LAFCO was seen as a neutral body and participated in many community presentations to help both the small community of Lompico and the larger water district in San Lorenzo Valley. Our one-person staff, we have one executive officer and administrative support, did the fiscal analysis and worked with a county administrative officer to figure out how to deal with the large PERS debt. When it came time for actually filing the petition for merger, we had a very dramatic LAFCO hearing where local residents of LAFCO districts some were not interested in merging. They saw that as their independence and a value of their community. Our commission did vote unanimously to approve the merger, and it required 2 votes. There was still a protest vote from the Lompico Water District ratepayers, and then also they needed to pass a bond to help pay for the repairs necessary in order to merge with the large district. After the election results were read, that bond failed by 1 vote. So now we had approved merger, but we didn't have any means to pay for it, and we're not going to saddle the San Lorenzo Valley Water District with that problem. So our LAFCO staff member and LAFCO commissioners worked with the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, who had gone through their own change. So we had to work with new people there to develop a new financing model, many more community meetings, until finally there was a successful vote for a much smaller financial responsibility. And today those 2 systems are merged. And you would think in Santa Cruz, a relatively small county where a lot of people know each other and where we have these 2 entities who want to merge, you deal with all the issues that Ms. Miller talked about. And the state coming in to do it wouldn't make it better. We still have to figure out how to pay for it. But we were able to work everybody together, and I think the community now feels strongly that this was the right decision to make.
So Commissioner Leopold mentioned it took 2 votes. Regardless of how logical a consolidation or dissolution may seem to LAFCO, to the district itself, the voters in the district have the final say on what happens. The LAFCO can expend years of time and resources, as he's provided the example, moving towards that kind of an action, only to have it be turned down by the will of the people being served. And there was an example in my testimony with Marin, LAFCO, and the 4 sanitation districts. It's the LAFCO that initiates the action to either dissolve or reorganize. They're the ones that absorb the cost. And so that's a factor that LAFCO seriously consider before they actually initiate any action. So while consolidation or reorganization may seem like a really simple, straightforward action, it's really not. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. The final point I want to make before offering you what we see as opportunities for the future is this. We feel it's best to keep local LAFCO decisions local. You asked us about the recent rash of legislation and what that does. How does that chip away at the foundation of LAFCO and the laws that govern LAFCO? Well, it's been our experience that while special legislation may address an immediate concern, it often results, more times than not, in collateral long-term impacts to resolving local issues. Local folks know best. They're most familiar with the local circumstances and conditions that apply. They have the history, and so they are the ones to best deal with these local issues. And so we continue to encourage the legislature to empower LAFCOs, to empower us to fulfill our legislative mission by providing us the necessary resources rather than choosing to diminish the authority. So what opportunities do we see in the future? We have several pages in our written testimony that contain a series of opportunities. Remember the Rambler story I told us a little bit ago? We'd like to see increased revenue options for LAFCO so that we can better fulfill the legislative mission. In light of the increasing call for us to conduct more in-depth studies of special districts, we would like to suggest that there be a consideration to providing special funding to us for local government reorganization studies. I think in my written testimony I reported to you that at least 45% of our 58 LAFCOs report that their budgets today are either insufficient or barely sufficient to meet their statutory requirements. We suggest that the state grant LAFCO the statutory authority and financial resources to identify inactive districts and work to dissolve those districts only after the appropriate studies have been conducted or certain determinations have been made by the LAFCO. We recommend conducting a statewide study on the effectiveness of municipal service reviews and make legislative recommendations. It's been 16 years now, since 2000, that LAFCOs have been authorized to conduct regular sphere updates and municipal service reviews. So we feel enough time has passed and enough LAFCOs have completed several rounds of these studies for there to be the kind of data needed to study and evaluate the effectiveness of this particular requirement. We know that there are certainly lessons learned and best practices to draw from. We agree with our colleagues in CSDA to work on streamlining the process to get special districts seated on LAFCO, and we're very happy to collaborate with them on that. We also suggest it's time to revisit and revise certain principal acts. And finally, we agree with CSDA on recommendation 3 from your 2000 report. It does contain several suggestions that we feel are worthy of a closer look, such as studying the longer-term effects of consolidations and reorganizations, and to develop performance measures for special districts that then can be used by LAFCOs when conducting those MSRs and SOI updates. So in closing, can we improve? Of course we can. There's always room for improvement, even for the best. And LAFCO continues to work with our members in understanding what their challenges are and identifying opportunities for the future for all of us. We're a collaborative partner and look forward to working with this commission, with the legislature, with our stakeholders, on implementing many of the recommendations that we can all come to a consensus on. And with that, I want to thank you for inviting us here today. I want to thank your staff. They have been extremely responsive, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, you had said, and we're sort of lighthearted, well, there are some attempts, are there not, currently to, they're analogous to what, if you've got a football stadium, you can just wait to see what happened, I'm curious if you have someone here who can sort of fill in, what were the dynamics? Because I think there's some lessons that might be learned. What were the dynamics that caused what happened down in Isla Vista? Where I think LAFCO, the legislation was written, and I think there are others that are sort of out there as well, that just sort of sidestep what it is that you're supposed to be doing.
Yes. So thank you for that question, and I'll take a moment and then my colleagues can step into. We, of course, have our own perspective, as does everyone else involved. So this is strictly speaking from our perspective. And I actually think there might be a commissioner from that particular LAFCO in the room. So the rash of legislation over the past 2 years, this year in particular, I think was spawned from AB3 in Isla Vista. There's a long-standing, not very positive relationship between the community and the LAFCO. And years ago, Isla Vista came to LAFCO, went through the process of incorporating. The LAFCO did its very extensive study, which included a comprehensive fiscal analysis. The LAFCO determined, based on a number of factors, not the least of which was the comprehensive fiscal analysis, that it did not make sense, that long-term it was not financially sustainable as a city. And so therefore they denied the application. So there has been some long-standing history. Isla Vista is a very unique community with a lot of unique challenges. So when it was time for the CSD, Assemblymember Williams wanted to create the CSD, there was not a lot of conversation from my perspective with the local LAFCO, because there was an assumption that it's going to get denied anyway, so why bother going? And other comments we've heard is the process is too long, it's too expensive, and it doesn't guarantee the outcome that we're looking for. So that's it from our perspective, what happened there. And this year, there are a number of bills, several of them pertain to healthcare districts. One is to actually, interestingly enough, expand a healthcare district that doesn't operate a hospital, expand the district boundaries. One is to mandate the LAFCO dissolve a district. One was to bypass the LAFCO process completely down in San Diego to have a water district provide water to tribal lands, completely bypassing LAFCO. In that particular instance, again, there was some work in years prior with that LAFCO. They even underwent a draft EIR and was being circulated for comments. And once the comments were received back, the applicant dropped the issue. Don't know why, I have suspicions, but you can come to your own conclusions on that. So I think that in general, the feedback is that in some instances, the perception is that the process is too long, it's too costly, and as I've said, it doesn't guarantee me the outcome that I'm looking for. And so they feel that, well, I don't know how, so we sort of grapple with, how is it any less costly to go to the state and do this through a state bill? So we struggle with that. And the more these bills get passed, the more we will see. What can we do? So LAFCO has been spending a lot of time educating our members on the importance of building local relationships with your state legislators. They're in their districts every Friday. People are less likely to go up against their friends than they are people they don't know, so to speak. So the more our LAFCOs can build those strong relationships with the locally elected officials, the more the collaborative nature will show up. So if somebody comes to a legislator, an assemblyman with a bill to dissolve a district, if that member is aware of LAFCO and understands the LAFCO process and the intent of the law, they can then say, you know, I think you need to go talk to your LAFCO first.
So is there somebody here from the Santa Barbara area LAFCO? Hi, do you want to come up and offer any insight, or are you perfectly happy where you are? You can just burn that. All right. Well, you don't have to come up if you don't want to. You got a chair over there. Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Craig Dyer, and I am the chair of the Santa Barbara LAFCO. But I think I, at this point, better say that my comments will be my own personal comments, not representing Santa Barbara LAFCO.
Yeah, certainly. See, because part of what I think we're looking for is lessons to be learned from what has happened in the past. So, for example, if there's consolidation, in some instances may make sense. In other instances, it may not make sense because the areas may be too unique to be able to sort of meld them. I think the idea that you have a mandatory dissolution of a district is what you were speaking of, understanding that the district had been established by a vote of the residents with identification of services to be provided and a tax structure that supports it and infrastructure that perhaps is in place. I don't think that comes without some consequence. And I do think that when an entity like a LAFCO is suggested to be irrelevant for certain purposes, there are consequences to that as well. If we look at LAFCOs and if we look at special districts as essentially a form of grassroots, right, that have been adopted by the people that live in those communities, then I don't think we should overturn that casually because I think it leads to unintended consequences. There are some intended consequences, but there's also unintended consequences. So with that backdrop, if you want to share something with this committee?
Well, what happened with AB3, in my own personal opinion, it completely bypassed LAFCO. LAFCO is that. It's a local agency formation commission, and it completely bypassed the local process. If there's some blame to be put on our local LAFCO, I would say that we probably haven't done the greatest job of educating the community of who we are and what we do. We have embarked on trying to become better with that. But it undermined the voice of the local community. Most of the things that happen with LAFCO start off with a financial feasibility study, whether it's an annexation, a merger, in this case, the formation of something new. It was predetermined of how the LAFCO would outcome. And that wasn't necessarily true. Personally, I was very involved with this, with the university. It was pushed by the university, it was pushed by our legislator, and at the end of the day, sometimes things you ask for, you may not want them. And I think in this case, I've been involved in Isla Vista. I came there in 1967. I ran a business there, a plumbing business, for 47 years. and I've seen a lot of changes out there. What was formed by this, it will give a voice, but financially, to start off with, about 90% of their initial budget will go to staffing, and so very little will be given back to the community. They do have a voice. It establishes a voice. It's a difficult area, and I don't have all the answers for it. The university is a tough one to work with.
Well, I mean, I'm sort of curious because it reaches back to the point, I think, that you were making, Commissioner, that there'll be an assessment of some sort. Revenues will be raised. Based on the projections, and by the way, how much do they pay you to work in your position over there at LAFCO? I think we got the answer to that one. But if the majority of that money goes to staff, you've elevated expectations for the people who live in that community service area. And they think things are going to happen because they went to a meeting and they had an election and they've got a community service district. So where's the stuff, right? So I think one of the consequences that happens when you elevate people's expectations, if you're unable to deliver, then people got to figure out who to blame for that. So you're going to blame the university because they were involved in the process. Well, more likely than not, they're going to turn to the county because they're county residents within a service district that looks as though it's not going to have the revenue to do what it is meant to do, which is what LAFCO had told them after you did your financial analysis.
Well, the real problem that I see with this one is it's not an assessment district.
Also, it's even worse.
It's a user utility tax. And I was very involved in the redevelopment agency for about 15 years in that district. If I learned one thing, we do not pay. And that's what the students said. And this user utility tax has to be passed by the students, basically the voters of our district. And actually, I'm going to be shocked if they do pass it.
Okay. Well,
Chair Nava, if I may, one of the other things that, one of the other commonalities of all of these bills that are bypassing LAFCO is that there are very complicated local political issues at play as well.
mm-hmm.
I would also add that the Santa Barbara situation is unique in the sense that there's legislation to create a district. Usually the fights we have in some of these other pieces of legislation about taking away a district that is taking resources where people feel as though there could be a better allocation of those resources. So that's much more common. And I know that when we do these municipal service reviews, we look at the issues of consolidation and shared services, but without the lever to make districts do it, sometimes we've spent in our first round of MSRs several years back a lot of money looking at fire districts. And I'll just point them out, not because they're special in the sense that it's unusual, but this is the case, is we spent a lot of money, about $60,000 of our $350,000 budget, studying fire districts, and we identified areas where there could be shared services and consolidations. And at the end of the day, the fire district says, thank you very much, and nothing happened. There's been 2 grand jury reports pointing to the same thing, and when we came to this year's round of MSRs, fire district said, why aren't you doing a more detailed study? And we said, well, we're trying to honor the resources. They're also, some of the fire chiefs show up every year to make sure that we're spending our budget, you know, as austere as possible. So now they were asking, why don't we spend more money? And we said, if you're interested in making some changes, we're interested in spending some money, but we can't make people do it.
Okay, understood. Any questions, Commissioners? No, thank you. This has been very illuminating. I appreciate your testimony and thank you for your work.
Our last panel this morning includes Michael Coleman. He's a consultant and the principal at CaliforniaCityFinance.com. And John McCall, who has served as the president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association since January 2001.
Just a reminder, if any of you will have public, opportunity for public comment at the end. I think we're handing out slips, so you'll have a chance to do that. Thank you. Well, welcome to both of you. Mr. Coleman, would you like to go for it?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Please understand that my remarks today express my own professional understanding and personal opinion, and are not necessarily those of the League of California Cities, the California State Association of Counties, the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers, the University of California, or anyone else other than me. Special districts are vital and effective components of California's mosaic of local government service providers. That's as true now as it was before Proposition 13 or in the decades before that. Local circumstances differ, service preferences and needs differ, and the ability of a community to make different choices regarding the allocation and the provision of public services is vital. So I start here with the principle of local choice. Our finance and governance systems should be flexible enough to accommodate different choices at the local level. And as priorities and needs change, citizens and communities should have the ability to make different choices among different municipal services and allocations. Imagine with me that you're on a city council or a full service city, and you've got all these different departments, but in your city, each department has its own fixed share of the general fund. The police department gets 25%, the fire department gets 35%, parks gets 10%, etc. You're elected policymakers, but you have no discretion, no authority to shift the amount of money from one department to the next. And even though these services all serve the same constituents. And then imagine that each of these departments is a separate agency with its own elected board determining the provision of each of these services and how to provide services among those. Now, from the standpoint of the individual program agency and their board members and the employees working in those areas and the advocates for those particular services, this is a great setup because they can have much more confidence that those resources will be there. From year to year, there's less anxiety about resources being shifted around. If there's funding left over at the end of the year, that can be returned back to that particular service. There's greater assurance that that program will remain intact. But from the standpoint of the constituent or the taxpayer, this may not be the most effective way or the best reflection of the particular needs of that community as a whole. The funding is balkanized, and irrespective of changes in technologies and service demands and priorities that are important to the community, for example, local libraries, they may have to severely reduce staffing hours even as parks areas serving the same district is generously funded and providing a super top level of services. So this happens in some situations in California. We have real world examples. We can look at a particular fire agency that for years after post-Prop 13, this is a rural fire protection district and has struggled with less than a 7% share of the total 1%. Even as the community has developed and grown, this is a volunteer fire protection district, but services standards have changed. The increasing pressures on the fire agency to provide services to a growing community, full-time professionals, higher standards, higher compensations to retain staff. The fire district would come to the city council each year at budget hearings and request support, additional funding, because they serve the same constituency essentially. And the city council might find some money in the budget for the fire district to help supplement services, but would inevitably respond each time that actually, fire services is not our responsibility. We're not a full service city. So this is helpful to the community, we understand, but really it's the fire district's problem. So after many years, the fire district placed a parcel tax on the ballot. It got 60% of the vote. yes, and failed, needing 2/3 because it's a parcel tax. Years later, it went to the voters with a mail ballot election, calling it a benefit assessment, really a parcel tax, but it got more than a 2/3 vote, so that's a relatively moot point. And so now that fire district is doing better with this additional parcel taxes of over $300 a year for a single family home. Less than 10 miles away, another fire district receives nearly 3 times the average property tax share that small rural fire protection district receives. And in fact, that 19% share rivals the base allocation to most full-service cities that are responsible for fire, in addition to police and parks and streets and other kinds of things. The agency's employees in this larger fire district are among the best paid in the country. Its equipment and facilities are top level, exceeding top standards. There are no supplemental parcel taxes for fire in that community, no benefit assessments, but cities in that service area, this fire district, did struggle through the latest downturn and had to reduce library hours and street maintenance funding. No one at the local level was in a position to be able to consider whether there was a better allocation of these property tax resources in order to think about what are our priorities here relatively, because those allocations are fixed. So let me assert some foundational principles here as we think about what a better way of doing things might be. Foundational principles for good government finance and governance. First, the authority to reallocate local revenues and taxes should be tied at the hip with the responsibility for the services for which those taxes are intended. If the policymakers are empowered with the authority to shift revenues from one program to the other, they should also have take the responsibility for those programs. You break it, you buy it. Second, it doesn't work if members of the board don't all have multidisciplinary responsibility. This idea of a board with one hat representing one constituency and one other is just a recipe for intense fraction. And everybody has to be able to balance all those multidisciplinary priorities together. The third, the choice about how to provide a service is a different choice than how to allocate the revenues. In other words, I've said this many times, and I should reemphasize here again, that special districts are in many cases, I do not doubt, the very best and most efficient, most effective service providers for an area. What I'm suggesting is that that decision can be made through contract, as it is in many cases, as opposed to a locked-in allocation of revenue. So the community has the choice to think about what's the best alternative for providing a service in the area. And fourth, the service needs and priorities among local communities differ. So a great virtue of local government is the ability of local communities to choose for themselves what's important and what their needs are, and to make different choices now and in later years as priorities change. And that includes, I might add, leaving well enough alone. So, I want to commend the members of the Commission for taking on this challenging topic. It's not without conflict and dispute. And I want to reiterate that my remarks today reflect my own professional understanding and my opinion and nobody else's.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners at this point? Mr. Falk?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting me here. By myself, in agreement with a lot of the things being stated, but I do want to say, from our perspective, from the perspective of taxpayers, there is a general understanding that local government, that government provided at the local level is something that's better than a higher form of government. If a service can be provided at the local level, it should be provided at the local level, not the federal level and not the state level. I also want to make it clear that much of the organizational issues that LAFCOs confront have to do with revenue. All these decisions are really, quite frankly, revenue driven. How do we get the money to finance the services that people want? And I want to make it clear that from our perspective, California is an extremely high tax state. We have the highest income tax rate in America, 13.3%. We're competing against Florida, Nevada, and Texas, whose top marginal rate is 0. We have the highest state sales tax rate in America. We have the highest gas taxes in America if you include the regulatory costs from cap and trade with the excise tax. So this is a very difficult environment for taxpayers, both individual and business. Even when it comes to property taxes, the myth that Prop 13 has made this a low property tax state is not going up by the facts. We rank 14th out of 50 states in per capita property tax collections. We are a high property tax state. Just last year, because of the recovering economy, the property tax revenues coming into the state coffers, actually local coffers, statewide, went up $3 billion. We also hear, of course, the myth that Prop 13 decimated California education. People are stunned to learn that today, we are spending on a per student inflation-adjusted basis 30% more than we were just prior to Proposition 13's passage in 1978, a day when everybody agreed that education in California was top-notch. The myths surrounding Prop 13 are legion. We have a top 10 list in our office of the top 10 things that Prop 13 has been blamed for, including the murder of Polly Klaas. The OJ verdict was blamed on Prop 13, and it's been blamed, of course, for a lack of choral singers. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and becomes somewhat silly after a while. In our view of high taxes on the state of California, I think it's clear that it has consequences on the state economy. We have significant net domestic outmigration, 1.2 million people over the last 8 years. More people have moved in than out. This is not international migration either, legal or otherwise, but just people moving in and among the several states. And the article that I just saw a couple days ago, that California's biggest export right now is the middle class. So we do have a lot of very high wealth individuals. This is a great state for high tech, biotech, but unfortunately, income inequality is a real issue, and it tends to be growing in California in ways that it doesn't in other states. Now, let me get to the issues at hand here. When we talk about revenue, I think Michael has touched on some important things regarding the allocation of property tax revenue. But let's make it clear that this is not Proposition 13's fault. Prop 13 said that the property taxes to be apportioned according to law. That's what it said, to be apportioned according to law. The legislature, of course, we all know the AB8 formula in the wake of Prop 13, divvied it up more or less based on what districts and cities were getting before that. But the legislature could change that tomorrow without doing any violence to Prop 13 at all. And we've taken no position as an organization as to whether or not that allocation formula should be changed. I actually think it should be, because I think there are a lot of anomalies that people have touched on. Michael has raised he says, let's think about a city that has these different agencies that are self-funding. I would suggest a different mind game, one that I've played with myself a lot, and that is, what if Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann did not say the property tax revenue to be apportioned according to law, but what if they had said the property tax revenue to be apportioned according to duly enacted resolution of each county board of supervisors? Now think about that for a moment. Cities would not like that, special districts would not like that, but it would move a lot of these allocation decisions to a lower level of government. And if I could go back in a time machine 40 years, that's what I would advise them to do, but that's water under the bridge. And we also know, of course, that the allocation formula is inherently unfair in many respects from a conservative perspective, because it had the tendency to punish efficient cities. Because efficient cities, low and no tax cities, that had no property tax revenues, of course that formula is kind of locked in. And there was some litigation, the Rancho Cucamonga lawsuit. They challenged the AB8 formula under equal protection theory. They lost. The Supreme Court said, no, your arguments with the legislature. And unfortunately, I think that was the correct ruling as a matter of law. I don't think it's that necessarily good policy. We've also been asked to comment on the issues of reserves, and there's been some comments this morning about some implications, how we don't understand the reserve issue. I would submit that we do very well. As we made clear in our submitted testimony, we like the issue of reserves. In fact, we supported the GAN spending limit, which made it clear that the state level that appropriations subject to limitation did not include, would not be subject to limitations, those appropriations into a reserve account, because we think reserves are generally a good thing. And it's also why we supported the various iterations of the rainy day fund that have come down the pipe. So we are philosophically in favor of reserves. I would also agree with some of the previous testimony that what is an excessive reserve is probably needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis. For us, there are examples of districts that have large reserves. To us, if there is a district that has 3 or 4 times annual budget and does not have an adequate capital improvement program even in place, or have no idea what they're getting, then that's a strong indicator that they're getting too many reserves. Also, the thing with the reserves is with those districts that get an increment from the property taxes, we find that in years like we're just experiencing right now, where they're getting a significant infusion, unexpected infusion of property tax revenues, they're still raising fees. And to us, fees need to be, under Prop 218, at least in theory, need to be limited to the cost of service. So I think that raises a question as to whether or not a district that gets both fee revenue and property tax revenue, if they're getting a new infusion of property tax revenue, how can they justify higher fees? Maybe they can, but I think that's a red flag for us. There's been a lot of discussion this morning also on the fire fee. Let me just conclude with just a couple comments on that. As you may know, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association continues its class action litigation on that fire fee. It's still in the Superior Court. The wheels of justice are grinding very, very slowly on this case. We did get a couple preliminary favorable rulings. One of the rulings that we got was that property owners do not have to fill out the petitions for redetermination every year. The state stipulated that the filing of one would be sufficient to preserve their rights. I have no idea when that case is going to go to trial. I wish I could, wish I had a crystal ball. I don't, but the state has no incentive to move that case along no matter what we do. It's interesting, I heard some criticisms from the fire districts about that CAL FIRE fee. At least one of our plaintiffs is a rural fire protection district, and I absolutely agree with the statement that was made previously that the SRA fee is having a chilling effect on the ability of local fire districts to go out and make the case to their constituents to support a benefit assessment or some other sort of revenue, because everybody say, well, I'm already paying the SRA fee. So we are very sympathetic with the rural fire districts and their criticism of the SRA fee. And by the way, I don't know of anybody who likes the SRA fee. CAL FIRE, the people that we've talked to in CAL FIRE, they don't even like it. The BOE doesn't like it because they're left with this administrative nightmare. So they hate it. So the thing ought to really go away. But unfortunately, we can't convince the governor to do that. Let me make one more comment about the passage of Prop 218 that in 1996, that was intended to close many of the loopholes in Prop 13. And one of the things that we did was we said that benefit assessments traditionally could be used for public services that provided a direct benefit to specific parcels of property, like a sidewalk, a sewer, something that had some direct connection to property. Under our interpretation, in fact, under the interpretation of the LAO, they said that fire protection services were not post-218 susceptible to benefit assessment financing. And I had a lot of rural fire districts come to us and say, this is going to kill us because we got funding through benefit assessments. I said, well, have you gone out and tried to get the 2/3 vote? The vast majority, particularly in the rural areas, They were putting these, they were converting their existing benefit assessments, and they kind of call them still benefit assessments, but they were technically special taxes. They required a 2/3 vote. They put them on the ballot, and these things were passing by 92%, 83%. The vast majority of those did pass as special taxes. Why? Because when your house is on fire, you want people to show up and put out the fire. I mean, it's that simple. And what Prop 218 did do is it did force local governments, including special districts, to reconnect a little bit more with their constituency. And I like the engraving in the wood above you. It says participation, the rights of citizenship presumes participation in the duties of citizenship. And I think 218 is one of these things that my advice to local governments, and we do advise local governments quite a bit, is make your case to the voters, don't hide the ball, be entirely transparent, even when things go wrong, and you'll be surprised how much support you'll get from the local community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think there was a period of time in the 90s when entities were adding surplus fees to things like utility bills and raising money that way when those should have gone to the vote.
Yeah, we won a couple lawsuits that had to do with what was called in lieu franchise fees that were supplements. There's all kinds of gamesmanship, and I talked to a few engineers with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and they don't like the skimming. Most of the engineers you talk to like the concept of cost of service because it gives them a target that they can proceed from.
Yeah, there were places in the 90s that were added bed taxes.
Well, we got those now.
Right. Yeah. But now they put it on the ballot. And for a while they were just sticking them on.
That's right.
Right. Any questions from the commission? No. No questions. I want to thank you both for your testimony.
Thank you.
I appreciate what you brought us to. All right, we're now moving into that part of the meeting, which is the public comment. I'm going to call, we've got 2 microphones. I'll call 2 people up at a time. Get behind the microphone, and then with the number of folks that we have here, I'm looking at like about 3 minutes per person. Kathleen Cole and Wendy Grinrich. Would you be so good as to come up? Good morning. And our first speaker, as I indicated, would be Ms. Cole. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mallett, members of the commission, and staff. I am Kathleen Cole. I'm the executive legislative representative for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And as the commission revisits the organization and governance of California special districts, it's important to remind you all what role Metropolitan plays in supporting the Southern California economy. We were called out in some of the written comments, and that's why I'm up here to kind of give another perspective for you. Unlike our special district brethren, we were created for a regional purpose, to import water supplies for the growing region. That began during the Great Depression and continues to evolve today. Our mission is to provide the service area with an adequate and reliable supply of high-quality water to meet present and future needs in an environmentally and economically responsible way. Today, we serve a 5,200 square mile service area, including Los Angeles, Orange, San Diego counties, and portions of Riverside, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties. Nearly 1,800 employees perform a wide range of water management services, planning, conservation, and other activities to serve our 26 member public agencies. We provide more than 50% of the region's water through imported supplies from the Colorado River and the Bay Delta, and also making investments in local projects and conservation. So this morning's discussion certainly raised 2 important policy issues for Metropolitan, that regarding the use of property taxes and retained earnings. To just put this into context very briefly, prior to the construction of the Colorado River Aqueduct system in the 1930s, property values for the inner core of Southern California, the core family, if you will, of metropolitan, about $2 billion. Today, that core has expanded to cover all the parts of 6 counties, as I mentioned earlier, to serve nearly 19 million people with property values that are fast approaching $3 trillion. And how did that come to be? Well, we made a reliable water supply available, and that was the primary driver for the economic vitality and growth of the region. So historically, Metropolitan has used property taxes to make those investments in water reliability possible. And to this day, property taxes are used to underwrite our water infrastructure development. We do plan to submit written comments to you and your staff, which should help put the district's use of the property taxes in the past, currently, and in the future into context. And in the interest of time, I want to adopt by reference Kyle Packham's comments regarding the retained earnings issue that you heard from him earlier on. We totally support his comments and his assessment. And again, in our written comments, we will address the district's net position as of June 30th of 2015. So you'll see how that's all broken down. So in closing, looking ahead, significant investment decisions loom in the not-too-distant future for Southern California. The Colorado River watershed has been in drought conditions since the turn of the century, requiring new partnerships and investments to maintain supplies for the region. The State Water Project faces historical modernization investment decisions in the ongoing California water fix process. Climate change, population growth, and other challenges require expanded local efforts to lower demand and increase supplies. So for all these reasons, maintaining a healthy financial condition and access to traditional revenue sources will remain important to Metropolitan's fiscal integrity now and into the future. And again, we welcome further discussion with you and your staff as you move forward with your study. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Wendy Ritterbush with the Association of California Water Agencies. I first wanted to thank your Deputy Executive Director, Jim Wasserman, and his staff for taking time out to meet with our association and some of our member agencies once we heard that the study was underway, and they've been very accessible, and we appreciate that. I'm here this morning proudly representing ACWA members, largely those enterprise special district water agencies who are creative problem solvers, committed and resilient public servants in California. The idea that came about through a written testimony that was submitted earlier today about taking local property tax from water districts that currently receive it, it would really limit their ability to respond to natural and man-made emergencies like earthquakes and our historic drought. It would take away from financing improvements needed to meet mandatory and increasingly stringent and expensive water quality regulations. It would prevent, in some cases, the voluntary subsidization of low-income water ratepayers living in disadvantaged communities throughout California. Also, floating the concept of taking reserves away from water districts, I think, is really misguided. We've heard several comments this morning in reaction to that. Reserves conservatively saved up over time by water districts have been mischaracterized and maligned really for decades now, and including inaccuracies as to the actual dollar amounts held. Reasonable reserves are a critical part of responsible management for water districts providing critical services to the public. Reserves are held by water districts for very specific reasons. There's restricted funds. Those meet the requirements and bond covenants of lending agencies, and they cannot be used for any other purpose. They're not simply cash sitting in a savings account. Designated funds are held to pay for ongoing and planned future capital improvement projects like above ground or groundwater storage, desal plants, water recycling facilities, projects that take decades and decades to build, often take decades to save for and plan in advance. Designated funds are also utilized to stabilize rates, which allow water districts to balance short-term fluctuations in reserves, avoiding or reducing rate increases. And you saw that recently with the, as I referred to, the historic drought in California for a number of years with water agencies. Lastly, designated funds provide districts with the financial flexibility to respond to these unforeseen circumstances and emergencies. I don't know that we can really escape the irony that for years the state of California rated and then borrowed through ERAF property tax dollars from special districts. I think it took the leadership and Governor Jerry Brown and his administration, frankly, to begin building up the state's rainy day fund, which is really its own version of reserves. That was applauded by the finance community and seen as a major development to begin to repair the state's dysfunctional state budgeting process. So that's what water districts have been doing all along for decades. Water districts are going to continue to innovate to respond to the immediate challenges of predictably delivering water in a really variable environment. Our member agencies have responsibly managed the property taxes that they've received, and they're continuing to provide stewardship over the reserves that they've saved for future uncertainties that unfortunately in California are all too certain.
Thank you very much. Danielle Coates, Jared Rushton. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Ms. Coates.
Good afternoon, Chairman Nava and members of the Commission. Thank you for hosting this important conversation on special districts. My name is Danielle Coates, and I'm here from Eastern Municipal Water District in Riverside County. Eastern was identified in the initial 2011 Hoover Commission report, and were also touched on in the testimony the written testimony that was provided. In 2000, we provided water, wastewater, and some recycled water to nearly 460,000 residents in Riverside County through our 555 square mile service area. Since 2000, our population has doubled in size, and we plan on adding an additional 500,000 new residents within the next 25 years. Eastern has provided steady service throughout the growth of the recent years, as well as throughout the historic 5-year drought that we're currently experiencing. Due in large part to our fiscal responsibility and our diversified water portfolio that was cultivated through investments in local supplies. As an example, Eastern has advanced large-scale recycled water projects and related infrastructure to grow from the once modest producer of recycled water now to one of the highest producers in the state. I bring this up to demonstrate that the district has accomplished what it has been advised to do, and that's to use the reserves and our revenues to fund infrastructure to serve the citizens and prepare for the economic uncertainty and extended drought conditions. Some of the examples of what we've put underway over the last several years is we've installed over 3,000 miles of water, recycled water and sewage pipeline. We've created a new treatment plant with expanded capacity offshore of our wastewater treatment plants. The district also successfully worked with our county public health officers and our LAFCO to consolidate our failing water system. And we also extend services by contract to some of the mutual water companies near our service area as needed. As the Commission considers various issues, please keep in mind that the district's financial picture has a lot to do with how the territory is evolving. Low growth areas or built out urban districts are not the same as districts that serve high growth areas, as you've heard quite a bit today. Our story is one of growth as we continue to serve a community that is less than 40% built out and has a fundamentally different need for our reserves than those that are fully built out. Growing districts like Eastern need to put aside funding today in the form of reserves to fund necessary capital projects for tomorrow. Built out communities have different needs, therefore each district is as unique as the communities we serve, and each special district has a responsibility to address the needs of their community. But it is important to note that funding agencies want to know that if the community is willing to invest in the local infrastructure before that institution is willing to invest, or that district could become a credit risk. Eastern's strong financial planning, diversified water supply portfolio, operational reserves, and significant investments have translated into a recent upgrade to a AAA rating from Fitch Ratings for our senior water and sewer bonds, which has translated into low interest rates for our district. We appreciate the opportunity to address the Commission today, and we will be providing some written comments to further explore our reserves and other conversations.
Thank you very much. Jared?
Hi, good morning, Chairman Nava and Commissioners. Thank you for hosting this meeting today. We think this is a great opportunity to highlight the great work special districts are doing. I'm here on behalf of the Taxpayer Water District. We manage an integrated water resources system that includes the provision of flood protection, the supply of clean, safe water, and environmental stewardship of waterways on behalf of Santa Clara County's nearly 2 million residents. We formed in 1929 as the Santa Clara Valley Water Conservation District, and we merged 50 years ago with the Santa Clara Valley Flood Control District.
The district effectively manages 10 dams and surface water reservoirs, 3 water treatment plants, an advanced recycled water purification center, a state-of-the-art water quality laboratory, nearly 400 acres of groundwater recharge ponds, and more than 800 miles of creeks, streams, and rivers. We provide wholesale water and groundwater management services to local municipalities and private water retailers to deliver drinking water directly to homes and businesses in Santa Clara County. Given the host of critical services we provide and the functions we perform in the tech capital of the world, reserves are not a luxury, but rather a necessity in order to provide immediate responses to unforeseeable events or discoveries, to ensure uninterrupted services, to maintain aging infrastructure, and to begin new capital projects. Having reviewed Howard Jarvis's testimony published this morning, their statements about the district are inaccurate, and we object on the record. They misrepresent our fiscal position. We will be submitting a letter in the coming days to correct what they posited about us. Now, regarding specific numbers for the district, due to dramatic increases in home values around Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County has allocated higher ad valorem property taxes to the district, such that we received $75 million in fiscal year 2014-15. Yet this amount is only a quarter of our total revenue, and through it, $6 million is allocated to projects by our water utility, $6 million is allocated to the district's general fund, and $63 million is allocated to non-enterprise projects for watershed management. Additionally, since the economic downturn in 2008, our retained earnings reserve have been below $20 million annually, and on annual revenues of approximately $350 million. Third, the reporting criteria changes under the GASB 2009 has inflated what our fixed assets appear as, and it's reported as $2.5 billion. But in fact, our cash and investments over the last 15 years have consistently been held between $400 and $600 million. We'll be noting that in the letter we submit. Regarding the current reserves, quote unquote, we have this cash and investments. As of fiscal year 2014-15, we have $565 million in cash and investments. $150 million of that is allocated to projects by our water utility. $65 million is allocated to our internal general service fund, and $350 million is allocated to projects for flood protection. And of that $350 million allocated to flood protection, $210 million was garnered from voter-approved special parcel tax measures in 2000, which were renewed in 2012. Because of our multi-purposes, we use a comprehensive regional approach to water resources management and environmental protection, which would not be possible if these services were fragmented across several agencies in our county. So for these reasons, we respectfully request that the Commission not revisit the path already established in 2000 and place an attack on responsible special districts that require sizable reserves for projects commensurate in scale, so that we may provide critical services to the communities who voted for the special districts that serve them. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ivy Ritterbush, and then Christine Compton. And it just occurred to me as you come up, not relative to the speakers, but that is maybe part of what we ought to be asking special districts as in this report is whether or not issues of climate change and adaptation have an impact on how it is that they do their business, and the notion of reserves. We did a report on climate adaptation and how successful or unsuccessful the state has been in encouraging. We pay a lot of attention to greenhouse gas. We haven't been doing very much on adaptation, although I think there are districts that are doing that. And I suspect that a realistic assessment of climate adaptation in certain parts of the state could have an impact on reserves. But anyway, you're not here to hear me talk. So, Ms. Ritterbush.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. Ivy Ritterbush with the San Diego County Water Authority, an independent public agency that serves the San Diego County's regional water wholesaler. We would just like to briefly address a comment made in the Howard Jarvis written testimony regarding our fund equity. While it is true that our fund equity has grown from $935 million to approximately $1.5 billion in the last 10 years, the testimony seems to suggest to create a false implication that this is spendable or liquid. The fund equity figure actually includes several components, some of which include net investment in capital assets, restricted reserves for construction projects, and restricted reserves for debt services.
So to imply that all the funds in the figure are spendable or liquid are just untrue. And so we appreciate the opportunity to clarify that for you today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Ms. Compton?
Good morning, I'm Christine Compton. I'm the Government Relations Officer for the Irvine Ranch Water District. We provide services to 390,000 full-time residents in Central Orange County and a daytime population of 500,000. Well, I would love to share with you some of the services we provide. I wanted to, given the testimony today, I wanted to first correct the record on retained earnings, but really focus on long-term financial planning and how that's important for districts that are responsible for have huge infrastructure responsibilities. Our residents and business customers are served by modern infrastructure, providing water and wastewater service at some of the lowest rates in Orange County. That can only be done through prudent and careful financial planning. One of the key elements of our financial planning is putting aside every year designated funds for infrastructure, replacement, and rehabilitation of existing pipelines, pumps, and other infrastructure, and then putting aside capital funds for new infrastructure we know we're going to need to serve developing areas. Setting these funds aside is prudent, but it's also fair to the ratepayers. It's fair for our current customers because they pay for the use of the infrastructure that they're using, but it's also fair for future ratepayers because it ensures that those future ratepayers are not entirely burdened and are not severely impacted by large capital expenditures. It also helps avoid unnecessary rate spikes, which we think is important. IRWD has planned extensively for infrastructure, both replacement and new projects. Every year we evaluate what those infrastructure needs are using sophisticated capital and infrastructure models. Our models indicate that in the coming years we'll need to invest $2 billion more to meet and continue to provide the high level of service we provide to our customers and to meet the new demands that will come online. Just to put that in perspective, over the past 50 years, we've built more than 1,500 miles of drinking water pipelines, 1,000 miles of sewer pipelines, over 500 miles of recycled water pipelines, over 50 reservoirs, and 2 large treatment facilities to make sure that we're providing adequate services. Since our inception, that's an investment of $2.5 billion. In the last 10 years alone, however, we've invested $1.1 billion. So you can see there's a significant amount of planning that goes into this. Over the next 20 years, our capital plans involve over 600 projects. So more to the point, in looking at this, the depreciated value of all of this infrastructure that we've built and large portion put in the ground is included net of the debt. So the cost of that infrastructure net of the debt is what's reported in our financial statements. So of course our retained earning numbers appear very large. This is required by accounting principles, and we live by that. We would love the opportunity to explain that more to the commission, because all of our infrastructure will have to be repaired or replaced at some point in the future, in addition to bringing more on. With that said, I want to stop just quickly and address your question before we sat down regarding climate change adaptation.
And you'll have to be quick.
I will be very quick. We take all of that into account in our water supplies and in our investment going forward to make sure that no matter what the impact is, whether it's climate change or whether it's related to an emergency, that we can respond. And so we have been very proactive at Irvine Ranch Water District in doing that, and we plan to do more. I would just ask the commission, as it looks at its report going forward, to consider all of these different factors, that we would be more than happy to share with additional information.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Valerie Leahy and, Ms. Faith. Or Mr. Faith. This might be Ramona.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry, my apologies. Valerie Leahy. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners, for allowing the opportunity to comment. My name is Valerie Leahy. I'm the Director of Public Relations and Legislation at Mayor's Memorial Hospital District. I drove 5 hours to be here because I feel this is very important. Mayor's Memorial Hospital District is in the rural corner of northeastern California. We obtained district status in 1969. We are an acute care and skilled nursing facility with campuses in Fall River Mills and Bernie. Our district boundaries encompass 4,000 plus square miles, but we provide service to 3 counties, Shasta, Lassen, and Modoc, and actually provide services to an area twice the size of our district boundaries, offering services to patients residing outside of our taxpayer base. We are a critical access hospital with a frontier designation, meaning that we have less than 11 people per square mile. The nearest other facility is over 70 miles away. Our district provides essential healthcare services to a population of over 14,000 people. We are one of the top 10 employers in Shasta County, employing nearly 250 people. The points that I wanted to address with you today are some of the things that have benefited our facility because we are a district public entity. One of those, the most recent, was our ability to obtain a USDA rural development loan. Because of seismic mandates from SB 1953, we have to replace part of our existing facility by January 1st, 2020. Because we are a public entity, we were able to secure this USDA funding for the construction of this new facility, which will house our emergency room, laboratory, and imaging departments. Secondly, as a district, we have been able to secure bond measures. In 2010, with 72% of the voters approving, we approved a $14 million bond. We have utilized slightly over $5 million of this bond to complete infrastructure repairs, upgrades, and other projects that were absolutely necessary to keep our facility in operation and service this very rural community. Additional bonds will be issued to complete the mandated seismic wall and fund portions of our new facility. Our board of directors has adhered to a commitment to our community to keep the assessments to taxpayers below $50 per 100,000. Currently, we are at $38 per 100,000. Thirdly, as a district public hospital, we were eligible to participate in the public hospital redesign and incentives in Medi-Cal program, which is known as the PRIME program. Our 2 approved projects, the Million Hearts Initiative and the Antibiotic Stewardship Program, are designed to change care delivery to maximize health care value to the residents of our community. Being a district has allowed us this opportunity. As far as our tax base, our district has a tax base of $870 million, but we collect only $600,000 annually in property taxes and an additional $450,000 in GO bond assessments. This is slightly over $1 million and accounts for 5 to 7% of our total operating budget. Finally, I would like to close by mentioning that our board has committed to transparency, and we are currently completing a transparency certification through the Association of California Healthcare Districts. Mayor's Memorial Hospital District is committed to providing quality health care to our rural community and to being diligent in our responsibilities as a district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Say.
Yes, thank you, members of the commission and staff, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Ramona Faith, and I am a nurse of 40 years, and I spent over 30 years in hospital operations. I used to run in Petaluma Valley Hospital. The last 6 years, I've served as the CEO of the Petaluma Healthcare District, which owns Petaluma Valley Hospital. So we're unique in a couple ways. One is we own a hospital and we lease operations. And we also are a district that does not receive any parcel tax or any tax of any kind. We were established in 1946. The district, as I said, does not receive any taxes. We've, up to 1997, we owned and operated our hospitals, our community hospital, but we engaged in a 20-year lease management agreement with St. Joseph Health. So in 1997, we leased operations to St. Joseph's. The lease ends in 2017, and we are actively engaged in a due diligence process to identify a new hospital operator. And our goal is to ensure continued access to a quality ER and acute care facility. Our average daily census is about 26 patients a day, and we serve about 18,000 patients through our ER annually. We do not just work to support our hospital, we also do a lot of community health work. We've been supporting community and public health efforts and projects within our district since we were created, including creating the Petaluma Health Center, which is now a model federally qualified health center serving 27,000 patients in our community annually. We also fund the only universal pre- and postpartum depression screening program for new parents in our community, and we offer free eating disorder clinics throughout Sonoma County. But in 2012, the board recognized that we needed to have a more strategic approach to identifying the greatest health needs within our community and engage our local residents in addressing these needs collectively. So we created what we call CHIPA. CHIPA is the Community Health Initiative of the Petaluma area. It is an advisory committee to the Petaluma Healthcare District Board, and it brings together residents, students, healthcare and service providers, business and community leaders, city officials, and school representatives, including fire and police we have at our table, they're great partners. We're focused on the greatest health priorities that we identified, which is educational attainment, mental behavioral health access, service access, and wellness and prevention. We've been recognized as a model for community engagement to address social determinants of health. As you know, more health care needs to be provided outside the walls of the hospital than inside the walls of the hospital. We provided critical backbone support to our community to work together to address conditions that negatively impact the most vulnerable residents within our jurisdiction. We actually serve 85,000, there's about 85,000 residents in Petaluma under the district. We do offer 2 drug service lines. One is Lifeline of the North Bay, which is a medical emergency response system that allows individuals to remain home and live at home independently. We also have a certified AHA training center, American Heart Association Training Center, and we train 3,000 people or so per year in CPR. We're engaged in a Heart Safe Community Initiative where we work very closely with fire to ensure, and really the goal really is to create processes throughout in the community that allows the community to respond to cardiac arrests outside the walls of the hospital. And we've had 2 lives saved this past year where students who were trained in schools saved their parents at home. So what we're focusing on really is, number 1, to ensure access to a quality hospital. Number 2, work with the community on population health management, and make sure that we address the social determinants of health.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Nicole Beluca, Vanessa, is that C-A-G-I-A? Vanessa Cagina Beluca. Beluca, I called your name first.
Thank you, Chairperson Nava and members of the commission. First, I just want to say Vanessa and I went to the same high school together. It's really cool. I'll be very brief because we submitted a letter for the record. I'm here on behalf of the City of San Leandro. We really want to thank the Commission's time for talking about special districts. Specifically, our issue is with regards to a hospital in San Leandro Hospital. The City of San Leandro has given $3 million to help subsidize the hospital, as has Alameda County, for a total of $6 million. Our frustration lies that there is a healthcare district within Alameda County, Eden, and unfortunately they haven't really stepped up. So we've been working some bills this year with Assemblymember Bonds and Assemblymember Quirk. We do want to thank the Commission for talking about the healthcare districts today. There was a study back in 2000 that had 3 recommendations that still hold true, so we look forward to working with the Commission and staff on next steps. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Vanessa Cagina on behalf of the Mosquito and Vector Control Association of California. We'll be submitting formal comments after the hearing, but do appreciate the ability to make remarks right now. So wanted to, in terms of the thinking that we're going into in this next report, touch on 2 big issues that MVCAC has faced over the years. The first is that of consolidation, and the second is that of reserves. So mosquitoes, in terms of where they gravitate to, and MVCAC as special districts are celebrating our 101st anniversary this year. So we're definitely one of the older special districts, and we're established because of growths of mosquitoes in San Francisco Bay. that were infecting minors and gold rush people at that point. So it was an immediate response, and I think, sort of the crux of why special districts exist. So mosquitoes really don't gravitate to what would be a county or a city necessarily, but rather a geographic territory or an ecology. So when we deal with the concept of consolidations, unless they're ecologically focused, it can be very difficult to do so effectively. And in letting us work with our LAFCOs locally in terms of figuring out what is the best geographic boundary for us. Those are the points that we'd like to hit on. The reserves, and I'm so glad that you brought up the whole concept of climate change and warming temperatures, because that is something that our members are dealing with on a day-by-day basis right now. So it is important and it's critical for us to keep large reserves in the case of public health emergencies. Right now, as we're all following on the news, it's spread the Zika virus. And in California, I'm sad to say that we have the presence of those two mosquitoes that are pretty prolific, the Aedes aegypti and the Aedes albopictus, in many parts of the state that we've never seen before. They're not native to California, and they're also not as sensitive to the traditional mosquito control chemicals that we've used in the past in terms of pesticides. So our local districts are trying to respond scientifically and evidence-based, but when you're dealing with prevention is difficult to manage and difficult to also measure. So for them to have large reserves in case of this, to hire seasonal employees, to try different chemical applications, to do aerial applications, to do the public outreach that they need to do, these are all critical components of any kind of mosquito abatement activity. It's also interesting to think about, and I'm sorry to say that the wildfires have also increased the activity that we need to take. So in Lake County, for example, we're just thrilled that they had the reserve that they did, the Lake County Abatement District, because when the fire there last year took down many structures, it completely obliterated the water system, and mosquitoes were then able to come and breed there as well. So in terms of preventing West Nile or sadly Zika, those are all things that we need to be in front of and need to be safely safeguarded for. So we appreciate the time today, and we'll look forward to working with you going forward.
Great, thank you both very much. Catherine Smith, Terry Benedict.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to address you at this very important meeting. My name is Catherine Smith, and I served as the Executive Director of the California Special Districts Association for 17 years. And it was in that capacity that I worked with the Hoover Commission in 2000 on that report. I currently serve as Executive Director of the Fire Districts Association of California, and I've been professionally involved with special districts for 30 years. Following the release of your first report, Special Districts, Relics of the Past, or Resources for the Future, leaders from all the special district organizations met in the office conference room to discuss the report. As you can imagine, we didn't agree with all the findings and recommendations or the interpretation of the data, but what we did find was there are a number of recommendations in that report that we thought the special district community would find beneficial. That dialogue led to the development of the Special District Leadership Foundation and the programs now supported by SDLF on district administration, governance, transparency, and overall operations. Following the report's recommendations on reasonable, transparent, and dedicated reserves held by special districts, CSDA brought together experts on local government finance, district administration, government officials, and developed a special district reserve guidelines. Over the last 2 decades, special districts have engaged and supported a number of changes in LAFCO law to address obstacles to reorganization and municipal service reviews. We work to get special district representation on local LAFCOs. I have watched special districts be responsive, proactive, and engaged in forums where discussions are taking place on effective and efficient service delivery and allocation of precious financial resources. The Little Hoover Commission's report in 2000 ignited a dialogue among special districts on how to respond to the findings and recommendations. Having been involved for the last 3 decades, I feel strongly that special district associations have collectively lifted our memberships in many ways, and those actions should be celebrated jointly with the Commission. For the last 3 decades, the issues of consolidation, property tax distribution, and reserves have been discussed, analyzed, and evaluated. There are many here today that have an opinion, as do I, on how those issues should be addressed. California's local government structure is a uniquely woven pattern of special districts, cities, counties, and JPAs. The state has tried to dictate how local government should be funded and how local governments should be structured within their communities. What we've learned is that the state level dictates may not work as well as empowering the local governments. Local governments are comprised of people. Those local leaders have been elected or appointed to serve their community. In my opinion, the most successful aspect of the 2000 report were those that were brought together in the special district community where we could find local solutions. That local collaborative effort among the special district community is what led to the actions that continue to improve special district governance and operations. I encourage the Commission to build upon this approach in their next report. Collaborate with and empower special district leaders. Join the dialogue like you did in 2000 to bring issues together where we can address them, what is a challenge to special districts or a concern to this Commission. I am confident that if that is done, the special district community will once again step up and engage where needed to tackle problems. Special districts are the government closest to the people. When I started in 1986, the way special districts were described as operating under the radar screen. And that was what people viewed special districts. I can say over the last 30 years, that has changed significantly. The districts are transparent, engaged, and I feel a lot of that has to do with your report, and I'm looking forward to the next report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brandon?
Can I present documents to you folks?
Of course. Now, we have someone right behind you. You can hand that to them.
I have 13 for each commissioner, and sorry, only 2 for staff. I finished those up last night, 5:30, so I'm a little tired, only got 2 hours of sleep.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate very much your commission. You have no idea. I've been waiting 10 years to speak to the Little Hoover Commission. And I think it's ironic that I'm going to talk about a special district where I think you had your first hearing, Orangevale Recreation and Park District. Am I not mistaken?
I've been before my time.
Okay, 1999. My specialty is special district accountability and governance. I'm not an expert, but this is about Orangevale Recreation and Park District and what's so dangerous about special districts. Why is oath of office and rule of law not being respected? By the way, I have 520 words, very important words. If you could waive that 3-minute time, I'd appreciate it very much. And I don't want to speak really fast, but normally I do. I, Terry Benedict, and the other 33,900 plus Orangevale residents, whether they know it or not, are victims of a dishonest and criminal independent recreation and park district. In 1983, Sacramento County supervisors publicly agreed to institute, reorganize, Orangevale Recreation and Park District for the benefit of Orangevale residents. It was not instituted to serve the prideful self-interest of the Board of Directors. Orangevale Recreation and Park District is being administrated and governed dishonestly and criminally. The district administrator and the Board of Directors have it both ways. As a 47-year Orangevale resident, it's truly sad that Orangevale Recreation and Park District has been hijacked by prideful, self-serving, and authoritarian Board of Directors who agreed to do things a certain way. Since 2006, I've spent 10 years and 8,000 hours learning about Orangevale Recreation and Park District and the reason it was reorganized, so I could publicly speak with knowledge, not with opinion. CSDA. I support Assembly and Senate bills that require Orangevale Recreation and Park District to be honest, accountable, and transparent to the stakeholders, property owners and taxpayers, and to the voters and residents of Orangevale. LAFCO. Municipal service reviews for special districts must include organizational chart. The MSRs that are listed on your website, this is for Sacramento, independent recreation and park districts lack the adopted resolution making determinations and accepting the final MSR. Your MSRs are fundamentally flawed. They are not substantiated by written Public Records Act requests. In other words, they're rubber stamped. Special district answers to the MSR questionnaire must be provided under penalty of perjury. Very concerning to me, this subject. Concerning the 2009 MSR for Orangeville Recreation and Park District regarding local accountability and governance, the Commission, LAFCO, determines that the district has shown a dedication to communicating with local residents in part. That was quoted, I'm sorry. The executive officer's comments, I won't mention his name, this is quoted. The district strives to understand the local service demand and shows dedication to communicating with local residents to provide services that best reflect interests of local residents. I'm quoting part. The following quotes were made by the current district administrator for Orangeville Recreation and Park District, publicly stating how the district's 2001 through 02 board of directors decided to have a private commercial retail disc golf business, and I won't mention their name, in Orangeville Community Park. We dismiss, quote, these are quotes, we dismiss the concerns of our residents. We waive those concerns. We go by our lawyer's opinion, and we accept our lawyer's opinion as good. What they actually did, folks, is called abuse of discretionary authority. And if you read my, I'm sorry, Chairman, you did not get my opening statement, so you will not receive my candidate statement that I'm running for public office. Please take note, after 33 years, Orangeville Recreation and Park District does not, capital letters, include Orangeville residents on its organizational chart. After 33 years, Orangeville Recreation and Park District does not, again, capital letters, have a board-adopted, approved community engagement outreach policy, plan, program, or procedure. That's after 33 years, folks. My final thoughts. Orangeville residents deserve an honest, accountable, transparent, and loyal recreation and park district. What happened to the city of Bell should remind us, not all, capital letters, people are worthy of the public's trust. Thank you very much. And by the way, my email address is iwatchspecialdistricts@mail.com, my hobby, and maybe profession if I get elected in November.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Catherine Scott, Jeff Armstrong. Welcome.
I'll be brief. Catherine Scott represents the District Hospital Leadership Forum. We work with our colleagues at ACHB to represent specifically hospital-based, district-owned hospitals, 39 of them in the state. We were specifically formed to work on the Medi-Cal waiver. Because of the nature of the district hospital, we are able to work on the 2020 Medi-Cal waiver with the state and match federal dollars to the expenditures made. So we've been able to bring in $100 million, I think Amber mentioned that earlier, in federal funding to support Medi-Cal patients and the services for those patients. The district hospitals are community-based hospitals. You've heard from a couple of them who are focused on making sure they meet the needs of their communities. They're dynamic institutions, and our association is solely focused on hospital financing and the ability to work with state and federal governments to ensure that financing is brought to district hospitals, both rural and suburban and urban, to ensure the services for Medi-Cal patients are met. Their structure is critical to their success. It's the nature of their structure that allows them to match those federal dollars and bring that funding in. This is new funding for our district hospitals. It's incredible to see. You heard some of the projects earlier. It's incredible to see what the $100 million in federal monies can do in the local communities. And it's because of the nature and structure, the governmental oversight that allows them to bring this funding in. If you have any questions about district hospital reimbursement and this type of funding stream, we wanted to make sure we were available to you. We'll provide some information to the community for future reference.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong.
Yes, my name is Jeff Armstrong. I'm the general manager for Rancho California Water District. We're down in Southwest Riverside County, and don't have a prepared statement, but since I got it at 3:30 to come here, I thought I'd make a couple comments. And we take very serious our role of providing a safe, reliable water supply, and we take a lot of pride in that as well. And one of our components of our mission statement is to do it in a fiscally prudent manner. So we have 7 board members. 4 of those board members are farmers, and if you want to be scrutinized and you want your reserves to be considered and looked at, have farmers on your board. That might be something to put in your report. They're tough. But the comments I wanted to make was, the first one, I think you talked about engaging the public. And I don't know what the benchmark today is for how to measure how well you engage the public. But it's an evolving world that social media plays a big part in that. You're reaching different generations and you're reaching them differently, and they engage differently. Certainly the Prop 218 notice, I mean, that's going to every customer. It spikes your calls that you get. And we do engage with our customers daily. The volume of phone calls that we get are incredible. And sometimes I think it's that one-on-one communication that where customers actually and the public really do understand what's going on. And that relates not only to water rates, but to property assessments as well. We get calls all the time about what is this property assessment? What does it mean? And we explain it to them. So I don't know what the benchmark is, but there's a lot of effort to engage the public. As far as the reserves and the property taxes, I just would suggest that prior to reaching a conclusion about those, that maybe you ask for some of these agencies to come up here and give you, where there's more time, a more thorough understanding of their financial plans, because they are very robust. We have a 50-year plan. It looks at our reserves, it looks at our debt, it looks at our capital needs. And they may go up and the reserves may go up and they may come down, but it's very complex and it's integrated, and it might be worthwhile to do that before you reach a conclusion. Property taxes are a big part of that for us. We use those property taxes that we receive to pay debt service on bonds that we issue to build the infrastructure. If we lose property taxes, we got to find another revenue source from those customers to make those debt service payments. And my last comment is climate, because you asked about climate. And certainly the drought, is important, and we have local supply that affects us that way, but we do see differences in how we operate. This year, in the wintertime, we had really hot times in the winter, then followed by cooler times, and then hot times, and then cooler times, and it really created a new normal for us in how we operate our system. And you have the quality of the water that's impacted by that. And so for us, we had to back off with some supplies, and we had to rely on reserves to go out and purchase more expensive supplies to get us through that period of time, because it was inconsistent water quality. So there are impacts of that we're dealing with in the reserves to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. That was very helpful. And let me just reassure everyone, the report is going to be written by us commissioners, so you can rest easy. It'll be written by staff after they receive your information and they analyze it. Many of you are likely to get calls from staff to clarify certain points that aren't obvious to them. And then we work collaboratively, commissioners and the staff, on the draft report so that it represents those things that we hear during the hearings, as well as the points that you provide in written material. So I just would like to make sure that you all feel a certain degree of confidence that the report will be taken seriously and that your issues will be discussed. And having said that, let me call Jessica, whose name I can't read, with the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, and Craig Dye.
For inviting our organization to participate in today's hearings. Most wastewater collection and treatment systems in California are operated by special districts. There's sometimes sanitary districts, county sanitation districts, community service districts, public utility districts, and water districts that provide wastewater service. These districts are unique in that they typically are formed in consideration of geographical drainage basins, since wastewater treatment is largely dependent on gravity flow. Our members build, operate, and maintain major public infrastructure that protects the public health and environment in communities throughout California. So we would just, to be brief, like to concur with the comments from our colleague Kyle Packham with the Special Districts Association in regards to enterprise special districts, special district reserves, and property taxes, and we'd be happy to provide any additional information of interest to the Commission for as your study moves forward. I just want to quickly say thank you for bringing up the issue of climate change. This is a very significant issue for wastewater agencies. One thing that came to mind was the impact of sea level rise. Many wastewater agencies discharge directly into bays or oceans, so infrastructure impacts from sea level rise is a serious consideration that we have to plan for. And then additionally, air quality and water quality regulations get more and more stringent every day, and to adapt to climate change, our agencies have to save and have reserves available to respond to these demands as well as emergencies. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, and you also mentioned that oftentimes you're cited based on gravity, which means you're oftentimes located in coastal plains.
Yes.
And who would have thunk, right, way back when, that coastal property would have the sort of value that it does now? And there are numerous facilities that are located along the coast that really do have to be concerned about sea level rise. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Geyer?
Hi, thank you for hearing me. I'm the board president of the Toledo West Sanitary District, and we want to support CSDA and LAFCO submitted comments. Climate change, probably more air quality, one more pumping, I guess I would be concerned about. Reserves, I think it's important to understand that districts have a capital plan, but they also have a financial plan, and the two work hand in hand, and they fluctuate because some districts, our local district, in the 55, 60 years that we've been in existence, has never borrowed money. We've always saved. So you can always point to a certain day or a certain time for a district and say, gee, they got a lot of money, but come back a year later and they've done some capital projects, and it changes, so it does change. And I'd like to make a comment on the Taxpayer Association's comment about districts raising fees when they receive property taxes. Districts dedicate their property tax fund to capital projects, and fees pay for O&M projects, and that does fluctuate.
Very good. Thank you very much. Karen Burr, I believe that's B-U-H-R, and Sloan Del Toro. Welcome.
Yes, it is Karen Burr. Thanks for getting that right. I appreciate it. It doesn't happen often. Thank you very much for talking with us today. As I think several folks have said, talking about resource conservation districts in particular is one of my favorite pastimes, so thank you for entertaining that today. Although I think we heard from some of the speakers, not always for the same reason. So I do want to introduce myself. I am the Executive Director of the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts. And to explain a little bit about what RCDs do, because I would imagine that you probably aren't aware of what we do, we play a really critical infrastructure in solving the state's really pressing environmental issues. So in particular, if you're talking about climate change, if you're talking about the drought, and even if you're talking about the ancillary problems that come from that, such as tree mortality and the fires, those are issues that we're not going to solve anymore without having all of our citizens engaged. And it is something that's going to happen locality by locality, citizen by citizen. Because if we all don't turn off our taps, and if we all don't reduce our emissions, this isn't something that's going to get solved. And that's where RCDs come in. We're able to go out and work with our communities in a locally appropriate way to work on making sure that they can still get all of their needs met, while at the same time being able to meet the state's really critical issues such as GHG emissions and drought. So we come in and we do that in a way that's voluntary and it's non-regulatory. So we're able to walk onto farmers' properties. We're able to walk in places that a lot of people just can't because we are able to have that non-regulatory bias, which is really nice.
You ain't from the government.
Yeah, exactly. The shotguns don't come out, so it's great. We're happy about that. And so we have this really critical role that you can see a county can't play because a county does have regulation. And it's also something that the state can't play because the state can't go neighbor to neighbor and get people to make those changes in any kind of realistic way. So we play a really critical role that augments what happens in the state. And really, as everyone's highlighted today, we all do have a very critical role to our own communities, regardless of what type of special district we are. So what I do want to point out is that, just like all special districts, we take our mission, our effectiveness, and our transparency incredibly seriously. We understand our communities, and we know that our community does not validate us if they don't believe in us. And so we take very seriously our roles that we play in serving our communities. And as you pointed out earlier, most of us are volunteers, so we wouldn't be sitting in the board seats unless this wasn't something that we did believe in. So what the RCDs have done, and I know all the special districts have taken really serious changes since the 2000 report because it was, I think, jarring for many special districts. Particularly what RCDs have done is we jumped in And we've gotten our RCBs on a voluntary grassroots effort to come together and create a voluntary set of standards for RCBs to comply to. And it's kind of a huge effort to get them to agree. Not only did they agree, but they agreed unanimously to both these standards upon themselves. And we take that seriously, we take that effort seriously. We then also gave them, knowing that they're going to have to step up to these new mandates that they put on themselves, we've also then employed an incredible amount of training and resources and support so that they have the ability to go through leadership training and to go through different, to be able to help them kind of meet those basic requirements and be able to know what the future of resource conservation districts look like so that we can be the leaders in our communities 25 years from now, 75 years from now, like we've happened for the last 75 years. And I won't go into detail, obviously, about that process, but if staff has questions, I would be happy to provide the standards, talk about our process, and we will have this enforced with a third-party agency, hopefully by the end of this year, and we'd be happy to talk about that process as well. So again, thank you for taking the time. I know we're running long, and it is one of my favorite things to talk about, so it'll be good.
Thank you very much.
Nothing was hungry as everybody else, so we want to talk fast. So hi, I'm Sloan with Streamline. We're a very small business that builds transparency tools, online transparency tools for special districts in particular. We partner with CSDA. We used to build big, expensive websites, and we would go to CSDA shows, and the little districts would say, yeah, that's great, can't afford it. So I have a special district background from a very small town, and I thought, well, let's just build a tool that starts at $10 a month, whatever. So that's what we do. So I have a little different perspective. I want to just request that your recommendations focus on keeping control as local as possible, because what we have found is that districts are actually very eager to be transparent if we can make it easy enough and affordable for them. I mean, they are so frugal with their money, they are so careful, and they really care about how they spend it. The other thing that I've noticed is that state mandates for transparency just don't often go so well. There was a bill passed last year called SB 272, requiring all local government agencies to create an enterprise system catalog of every piece of software they use that didn't have exemptions, and you know how these bills can go. We built a free tool because they put it in the Public Records Act so that they wouldn't have to reimburse for the mandate. So we felt we couldn't charge for the tool. And you know, the amount of questions that I have fielded, because I'm the only person that's brave enough to go, I don't know, let's say that's exempt, let's say, you know, because there's just not enough guidance. The law is just really hard and everybody wants to comply, nobody really understands how. So that's just, I just don't feel like that's the way to go about it. So we worked with CSDA to build this tool for everybody. And then the last thing I want to talk about, well, I'll touch on the SRA at the end, but the idea of consolidation does sound very good. And in McCallum Hill, a 700-person town where I was born and raised, 4 special districts, our fire district, my dad actually is out on a fire right now, under a lot of pressure from the county to start consolidating some of these little rural fire districts because they obviously can't be efficient if they're so little. So for us, we had 700-ish citizens in town. We covered about 3,500 citizens total in our district. We found that the other small districts that did consolidate, their ISO rates went up to like an 8 and 9. They had to close fire stations and the coverage just wasn't as good and they were losing a lot of houses. And our little district fought and fought. We were one of the ones that was actually able to pass a parcel tax of $75 per home. And we even passed that after the SRA. And we did it through talking to the citizens, and they decided they wanted to pay that. So one of the things that's interesting is, so I pay both on my property in that town. CAL FIRE State has yet to save a home in my town. They never have. They're not in town. Our district saves the homes that get saved. And even during the big Butte fire last year, my fire district and our neighboring fire district saved the entire town inside the town limits. So we're not an incorporated city. And then just because we've all been so curious about the SRA fee, I do have a theory, having been in fire for a lot of years. I think it might have been passed to cover the expense of the big branding effort they had to do when they went from CDF to CAL FIRE. Sorry, that's a little tongue-in-cheek, but when you were out on these fire lines and you look at the number of engines that they had to rebrand, and I know how much science costs, because I used to be a science painter, you know, I've been just like, I think maybe that's where the fee went to go with the timing.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Emily Barnett. Welcome.
Thank you so much. No relation to Commissioner Barnett, although I'm here
Specifically, we were mentioned in the 2000 report, and I'm not surprised you're mentioned in comments to follow up from Howard Taxpayer Association. I do want to address those, but I also want to address public engagement, which is a passion of mine. First and foremost, there was comment about our fund equity figure, that it was a jump of 300%. It looks like that range of date was over 18 years from 1997 to 2014. It took us a while to figure out the actual dollar figures of that 214 number, and apparently it was misreported by $216 million. So the actual change is from $430 million in 1997 to $644 million. This would actually be a 50% increase in our fund equity, not a 300% increase. I also do want to address property taxes. We serve approximately 500,000 customers in the East San Francisco Bay Area. Of course, our revenue has gone up as housing prices have gone up. I know this because I cannot purchase a home in that area myself. It is rather expensive. But I do want to say that we commit 100% of our tax revenue to infrastructure investments and also to pay our obligations. As far as public engagement, I was thinking as some other sister agencies were talking about that. And again, this is a passion for me, certainly when I'm hired at the district. I would say that as far as the Central Contra Costa Sanitary District goes, we are accessible, and I think a lot of maybe private entities cannot say that. We're rather large, but I could tell you 1 of 3 people who will answer the phone if you call our main number, because I know who those folks are. And I think that accessibility really matters. All of our employee numbers, for the most part, are published, and so we're accessible that way, direct lines. But on top of that, we ask our customers. We do comprehensive customer research that says, how do you want to be communicated with and what's important to you? And that really drives where we head as a district. To that point, we just hosted an open house with 1,000 customers. There was toilet racing. It was quite fun, I assure you. But we also gave treatment plant tours and a number of other things, and people are so excited to see that. We also produce, which is very unusual, a newsletter that goes to every one of our customers. And we tested that newsletter, and it's award-winning. It's a wonderful publication. It talks a lot about pollution prevention and some other things. But our success rate on that is 2/3 of our customers read that document. That's unheard of in the industry, and it has a 91% satisfactory rating. So those are the types of things that we're really passionate about. Not having that disconnect between, and again, you'll hear our phraseology, it's not a ratepayer to us, it's a customer to us. And we make sure that whether or not you're an engineer or you're someone that is, digging a large trench so you can put in a pipe, or whether or not you're the communications person, that you treat everyone that you meet as that customer. So that's what I want to share with you, and thank you so much to this commission. We look forward to working with your staff.
Thank you for your testimony. That'll conclude the public comment. And when we leave here, we'll reconvene across the street somewhere.
That will be at 925 L Street in the lower level conference room, where we will convene a business meeting at approximately 1 p.m.
But I do want to, again, thank all of you for taking the time to be here. Somebody drove 5 hours. I'm sure somebody flew, even longer distances. But I do have to say that it's inspiring. It is inspiring to see people give of themselves in the communities where they live and send their children to school and maybe even sometimes work. Invest of themselves through the special project district or through the special districts, through LAFCO, through community organizations, mostly unpaid, because you bring the gifts of your talent and your passion and your love for the place where you live and the people that you share your lives with. And you're right, you don't get that much from Sacramento. I like to say that I wasn't any smarter the day after I was elected than I was the day before. People just treated me like I was, and that was a mistake. So those of you that do this day in and day out, please know that there are people who recognize your commitment. And you make where you live a better place for yourselves and other people to live as well. And so thank you very much for being here.